The Servitor Handbook by Rocko Williams. Audiobook version. Understanding what a servitor actually is. A servitor is a structured thought construct created through intention, visualization, and symbolic encoding. It functions as a psychological magical tool designed to support a specific task or behavioral pattern. Unlike spirits from established traditions, a servitor begins as a symbolic program rooted in your subconscious architecture. Its effectiveness relies on clarity of design rather than belief in external entities. This ensures the practitioner remains in full control of the construct at all times. Servitors differ from sigils, rituals, and affirmations because they are ongoing rather than momentary. They act like a long-term anchor that nudges the mind towards certain behaviors, emotional states, or cognitive patterns. By externalizing a function into a symbolic agent, the practitioner can bypass internal resistance and engage a more cooperative internal system. This psychological mechanism is part of what makes servitors so useful. Most misunderstandings arise when people assume servitors are spirits with independent will. In truth, a servitor behaves exactly as programmed, following the practitioner's rules and boundaries. It cannot exceed its instructions unless those instructions are vague or contradictory. When rules are precise, the construct remains stable and predictable. The purpose of creating a servitor is not to escape responsibility, but to reinforce discipline through symbolic structure. It supports action and mindset but cannot replace personal effort. Approached correctly, it becomes a sophisticated self-development tool. A servitor, at its core, is a symbolic extension of your intention that gains functional stability through repetition, focus, and structure. It is a disciplined method of working with the deeper layers of the psyche, giving you a reliable internal ally that performs a single job without interference in other aspects of your life. When built with care, it can become one of the most powerful and safe tools in modern magic, bridging the gap between psychological insight and occult practice with a clarity few other methods can match. Why servitors work, the psychology and magic behind them. Servitors operate through a blend of symbolism, suggestion, and subconscious conditioning. When you create a servitor with clear rules, a defined purpose, and a structured form, you are giving your subconscious a blueprint to follow. The mind responds exceptionally well to defined imagery and ritualized intent, making servitors an efficient pathway into deeper cognitive processes. Their power lies not in external supernatural forces, but in the deliberate shaping of inner symbolic systems. From a psychological standpoint, the servitor creates a split processing channel. By externalizing a task into a symbolic entity, the mind becomes more willing to follow its own intentions. This reduces internal friction and strengthens consistency. The servitor becomes a focus point for habits, emotional shifts, and motivational nudges. The subconscious interprets the construct as a helper, not a demand, which often results in smoother behavioral change. Magically, the servitor serves as a container for directed energy. The act of creation, visualization, and ritual anchoring binds intention into a stable symbolic form. This provides continuity across days, weeks, or months. Unlike sigils that release and dissipate, servitors remain active as long as you maintain them, making them suitable for long-term goals. Their symbolic nature gives them flexibility while keeping them grounded in your personal system. When these factors combine, the servitor becomes a functional hybrid of mental discipline and ritual power. Its predictability depends entirely on the structure you give it. Chaos arises only when instructions are vague or emotional states are unstable during creation. This is why clarity, grounding, and responsibility are emphasized in servitor craft. What ultimately makes servitors work is the consistent alignment between intention, imagination, and behavior. They thrive when the practitioner respects structure, honors boundaries, and remains emotionally stable. The servitor is not a creature to obey you, but a reflection of the part of you that is ready to change, operate, and grow. It works because you work, and together the system produces results that are both tangible and transformative over time. The risks of servitor practice and why clarity matters. Every beginner should understand the realistic risks associated with servitor work before beginning. These risks are not supernatural dangers but psychological pitfalls that emerge from unclear rules, emotional instability, or over-attachment. When a servitor feels frightening, overwhelming, or intrusive, it is almost always a reflection of poor structure rather than any external force. Knowing this helps the practitioner maintain confidence and stability. The first major risk is emotional projection. If you are anxious, unstable, or going through intense life stress during creation, those emotions may imprint into the servitor unintentionally. This can lead to a construct that feels heavy, agitating, or unhelpfully intense. For this reason, creating servitors while upset, depressed, or desperate is strongly discouraged. Stability is the foundation of safe servitor work. The second risk is dependency. Some practitioners begin treating their servitor like a guardian, friend, or emotional crutch. This undermines psychological independence and can lead to unhealthy patterns of avoidance. A well-designed servitor should always encourage self-reliance, not replace it. If dependency forms, immediate decommissioning is recommended for the practitioner's well-being. The third risk is vague rules. When boundaries are unclear or contradictory, the servitor may nudge behaviors unpredictably. This leads to confusion, misinterpretation, or symbolic drift, where the practitioner assigns meaning to everyday events as if the servitor caused them. This is corrected by rewriting rules and focusing on grounding practices to restore clarity. These risks are easily managed with thoughtful preparation and disciplined boundaries. A servitor is a neutral structure that mirrors the clarity and stability of its creator. When approached with responsibility, it remains a safe, powerful extension of your intention. Understanding the risks is not meant to frighten but to empower you, ensuring that every step you take is measured, conscious, and aligned with your growth as a magician and a grounded human being. Preparing yourself mentally and emotionally. Before constructing a servitor, you must perform an honest self-assessment. Servitor work requires emotional steadiness, clear thinking, and the ability to follow through with plans. If your life is chaotic or your mental state unstable, the servitor will reflect that environment. Preparing yourself ensures the construct arises from clarity rather than confusion. This preparation is not ceremonial, it is personal responsibility. Grounding is essential. A calm, centered mind prevents accidental emotional imprinting during creation. Simple grounding practices such as slow breathing, journaling, or brief meditation stabilize your inner space before ritual work. These methods ensure you are fully present and do not project fear, desperation, or unresolved trauma into the servitor's foundation. Even a few minutes of grounding can dramatically improve the quality of the final construct. You must also clarify your expectations. A servitor is not a miracle worker, savior, or shortcut. It supports your growth but does not replace effort. Reflect on why you want the servitor and confirm that your intentions are self-aligned, ethical, and realistic. This honest clarity helps prevent symbolic misunderstandings later on. Finally, evaluate your boundaries. Servitors require you to maintain healthy psychological space. If you tend to anthropomorphize, catastrophize, or become emotionally attached to symbols, then extra structure is needed to prevent confusion. Healthy detachment is key. You direct the servitor does not influence your emotions outside its defined purpose. When you enter servitor work from a stable, grounded, self-aware state, the practice becomes safe, predictable, and highly effective. Preparing yourself ensures you approach creation with strength, clarity, and confidence, giving the servitor a stable birthplace within your symbolic system. This preparation is the soil from which all healthy servitors grow, and skipping it almost always leads to complications down the line. Choosing the servitor's purpose, the principle of single function. A servitor must be designed with one purpose only. This is one of the most critical rules of servitor craft. Giving a servitor multiple responsibilities creates confusion, weakened performance, and symbolic drift, where the construct seems to lose direction over time. A focused purpose creates a stable, reliable tool that behaves exactly as intended. This is the foundation of safe, predictable servitor work. To select the servitor's purpose, write down all the things you wish you had support with. Then examine the list and choose the single most relevant need. Keep it narrow. Help me study consistently is realistic. Fix my life is not. The more specific the purpose, the more effective the servitor becomes. Your subconscious thrives on precision, not ambiguity. This clarity also prevents emotional misinterpretation later. Once the purpose is chosen, you must phrase it in a neutral, grounded way. Avoid dramatic language or desperation. A clear intent such as "this servitor supports my daily writing discipline" is far more effective than "make me a successful writer." Keep the wording behavioral, not aspirational. Servitors shape your process, not your fate. This keeps the construct in a manageable and predictable lane. You must also verify that the purpose is ethical and self-contained. Servitors should not influence others without their consent, interfere in relationships, or manipulate external outcomes. They are tools of self-regulation, not tools of control. An ethical purpose ensures emotional safety and long-term stability in your practice. If a purpose feels questionable, revise it until it reflects integrity. A single, precise purpose is the engine that powers the servitor effectively. When the intention is narrow, stable, and personally responsible, the servitor becomes a clean extension of your will. It helps you act consistently, think clearly, and pursue your goals without confusion. This clarity sets the stage for everything else that follows, from rule setting to activation, charging, and long-term maintenance. Defining the servitor's rules and boundaries. Rules are the servitor's internal operating system. Without rules, the construct becomes unstable or unclear. Every servitor must have explicit, written boundaries that govern its behavior. These rules protect you emotionally, psychologically, and symbolically. They ensure the servitor never interferes with areas outside its assigned purpose. When rules are clearly defined, the servitor remains predictable, gentle, and supportive. Good rules are simple. They describe what the servitor can do and, more importantly, what it cannot do. Examples include: the servitor influences only my internal state, the servitor never acts through fear, and the servitor only supports the behaviors I consciously choose. These statements ensure the construct aligns with your values and never crosses into territory that feels intrusive or overwhelming. Simplicity keeps the servitor structurally clean. Restrictions matter as much as permissions. You must clearly state what the servitor is forbidden from doing. Prohibitions may include influencing others, generating emotional discomfort, acting during sleep, or triggering stress responses. These boundaries create safety and prevent misinterpretations. A well-defined prohibition list ensures that even under stress, the servitor behaves responsibly within your symbolic system. Your rules must include an override command. This command instantly pauses the servitor, regardless of context. Something like "Servitor, stand down" is enough. This gives you control in any situation and builds confidence. Even though servitors are safe, having a stop mechanism strengthens your psychological grounding and prevents fear-based reactions if you ever feel overwhelmed. When a servitor is governed by clear, simple rules that define both permissions and limitations, it becomes the safest possible tool in your magical practice. These boundaries are not just mechanical instructions but reflections of your will, ethics, and emotional well-being. Structure creates safety, safety creates confidence, and confidence allows the servitor to function at its highest potential without ever destabilizing the practitioner. Designing the servitor's appearance and symbolism. A servitor's appearance is not its identity but a symbolic interface your mind uses to interact with it. Choosing or designing this appearance should be simple, practical, and emotionally neutral. Abstract shapes, small geometric figures, animal-like forms, or soft spheres of light work well. Avoid humanoid or intimidating designs, especially if you are prone to emotional projection. Stability and comfort are more important than artistic detail. The form you choose should reinforce the servitor's purpose. A servitor built for focus might appear as a small clear orb, while one designed for emotional balance might resemble a smooth stone or gentle flame. Symbolic alignment strengthens subconscious cooperation. The visual consistency makes it easier for your mind to recognize the servitor's function during activations. Simplicity helps maintain control and prevents overcomplication. During creation, you should sketch or describe the form in a sentence or two. This ensures clarity and prevents the servitor from becoming an amorphous idea that shifts unpredictably. The drawing does not need to be beautiful. Its purpose is to stabilize your visualization. If the appearance feels wrong at any point, revise it early before charging begins. The final form should feel calm, helpful, and unmistakably yours. Your emotional response matters. The servitor's form should never evoke fear, discomfort, or authority. If it feels too powerful or too human-like, you risk subconsciously assigning it agency it does not possess. Keeping the design small, friendly, and abstract prevents psychological misfires and strengthens your sense of control. This design becomes the visual key that anchors the servitor's essence. When the appearance is simple, aligned, and emotionally grounded, you create a symbolic interface your subconscious can engage with safely and consistently. This form becomes the servitor's face, not in a literal sense, but as a stable symbol of its function. A clean design stabilizes the entire servitor system, allowing everything that follows, charging, activation, maintenance, to unfold smoothly and predictably without emotional distortion or symbolic confusion. Creating the servitor's sigil. The sigil is the servitor's anchor, address, and energetic signature. It is the most important symbolic component of the construct. Unlike decorative logos, servitor sigils must emerge from the intention itself. The classical method works well: write the servitor's purpose as a sentence, remove repeating letters, exclude vowels if desired, and combine the remaining shapes into a unique glyph. This process compresses meaning into a single visual form. This sigil becomes the servitor's physical home when not active. It is the point of connection you use during activation, charging, and maintenance. The sigil must be easy to draw by hand and recognizable even when sketched quickly. Overly complex sigils lead to confusion during ritual work and weaken psychological engagement. The glyph should feel distinct but simple enough to internalize. Drawing the sigil with intention matters. Slow, deliberate strokes imprint meaning into the symbol and deepen your connection with the servitor. This is not superstition but psychological alignment. Your subconscious reads your movements, your focus, and your consistency. By treating the sigil with attention, you give the servitor a stable core around which its identity forms. Rushed or careless drawing weakens this foundation. Once the sigil is finalized, draw a clean version on a dedicated card or page. This becomes the servitor's official anchor. You may decorate or frame it, but avoid adding additional symbols unless they directly relate to the servitor's purpose. Too much decoration muddies the intention. The sigil should be the clearest symbol in the entire system, acting as the servitor's central point of coherence. A well-crafted sigil unifies intention, symbolism, and identity. It becomes the servitor's heart and address, used during every major phase of its life cycle. This single symbol can anchor months or years of subtle psychological cooperation. When created with precision and care, the sigil ensures that everything built upon it remains strong, focused, and aligned with your highest clarity. Choosing a vessel or home for the servitor. Every servitor benefits from having a defined home, a vessel, a location, or a dedicated mental space. This home stabilizes the servitor's identity and prevents symbolic drift. The vessel acts as the servitor's resting place when inactive and becomes the foundation for safe activation and deactivation. It is a symbolic anchor that keeps the servitor grounded and contained. Physical vessels are the simplest and safest option for beginners. Stones, pendants, boxes, small statues, or dedicated tokens work well. Choose an object that feels neutral, durable, and easy to protect. Avoid sentimental items or objects with emotional history. The vessel must be clean, free of symbolic baggage, and dedicated solely to the servitor. This clarity ensures the construct remains psychologically separate from other aspects of your life. A vessel does not contain a spirit. Instead, it anchors the servitor symbolically within your mental map. Touching or seeing the vessel cues your subconscious to activate or deactivate the servitor. This makes the practice predictable and structured. Without a vessel, the construct risks becoming too abstract, leading to confusion or difficulty engaging consistently. Beginners benefit greatly from the grounding a physical object provides. If you choose an internal or imaginal home instead of a physical object, it must be defined with equal precision. A specific location in your inner world, a chamber, light sphere, or symbolic space, can serve as the servitor's resting place. This requires stronger visualization skills and emotional stability. Without discipline, internal homes can become too fluid. Only choose this method if your internal landscape is already well structured and reliable. A well-chosen vessel or home gives the servitor a stable, predictable existence and gives you confidence in your control over the system. This home becomes the foundation for every interaction, ensuring you always know where the servitor rests and how to access it safely. The vessel does not empower the servitor, it empowers you, providing order, clarity, and a physical reference point for your symbolic work. Writing the servitor's contract. The servitor's contract is the written agreement that defines the construct's entire existence. This document outlines its purpose, rules, boundaries, lifespan, home, activation method, and dissolution procedure. Writing the contract solidifies your intention and removes any ambiguity. It becomes the servitor's law, ensuring it operates within safe parameters. This clarity is essential for psychological grounding and magical stability. Begin the contract by restating the servitor's purpose in one simple sentence. Follow this with a list of tasks the servitor is allowed to perform. Keep this list short, clear, and focused. Overly broad permissions lead to confusion. After the allowed behaviors, list the forbidden actions. These boundaries protect you emotionally and ethically. They also prevent accidental symbolic interpretations that might otherwise cause discomfort or anxiety. You must include the override command. This command pauses the servitor instantly and unconditionally. Also include the servitor's lifespan, task-based or time-based. This ensures the construct does not linger beyond its usefulness. Completing the contract with a dissolution plan closes the cycle, guaranteeing you remain in full control. This plan removes uncertainty and reinforces psychological safety throughout the servitor's lifespan. The contract should be written neatly on a dedicated page in your journal or grimoire. This document is not ceremonial but functional. It is a tool to keep your practice organized, your mind structured, and your servitor predictable. Revisiting the contract regularly helps you stay aligned with your intention and adjust rules if necessary. It acts as a constant reference point. A strong servitor contract ensures safety, clarity, and effectiveness. It reflects your intention, your boundaries, and your responsibility as a practitioner. When the contract is complete, you possess a blueprint that guides every step of the servitor's life cycle. This structure transforms servitor practice from risky experimentation into a disciplined, stable, and deeply empowering method of psychological magical craft. Establishing the servitor's lifespan. A servitor should never be created without a predetermined lifespan. This ensures the construct remains safely contained within a clear beginning and end. Lifespans keep servitor work from drifting into dependency, confusion, or emotional entanglement. Deciding the lifespan upfront reinforces your authority and keeps your symbolic environment clean. This step also ensures the servitor does not outlive its usefulness or become a background presence you forget to dissolve. There are two stable lifespan types, task-based and time-based. Task-based lifespans end automatically once the goal is achieved, such as completing a project or establishing a habit. Time-based lifespans last for a set period, such as 30, 60, or 90 days. Beginners benefit from time-based cycles because they guarantee closure even if goals shift. Either method is effective as long as it is clearly stated in the contract. A lifespan also protects the practitioner emotionally. Servitors are symbolic tools, not companions. When you know the servitor will dissolve at a specific time, you maintain healthy boundaries and prevent attachment. This reinforces your independence and keeps the servitor in its proper role, a temporary extension of your will. The ending is just as important as the beginning. Defining the lifespan also keeps the servitor from accumulating unnecessary symbolic weight. Without a clear end, the practitioner may begin attributing coincidences, emotions, or dreams to the servitor long after it has served its purpose. This destabilizes the practice and can create unnecessary confusion. Lifespans ensure the energy remains fresh, focused, and clean. A well-defined lifespan is one of the cornerstones of safe servitor craft. It keeps your magical ecosystem orderly, supports emotional balance, and ensures the servitor's influence remains tied to its original purpose. When you commit to a clear lifespan, you preserve the integrity of your work and maintain a healthy relationship with symbolic processes. This stability allows you to grow as a practitioner while keeping all constructs grounded in clarity and discipline. Preparing the ritual space. The environment in which you create a servitor strongly affects its stability. A clean, intentional ritual space reduces distractions and strengthens your focus, allowing the servitor to form within a calm and disciplined mental state. The space does not need to be elaborate or ceremonial, it simply needs to be orderly and dedicated to the task at hand. Preparation sends a signal to your subconscious that you are entering a controlled, purposeful mode of work. Begin by clearing physical clutter. Remove unrelated objects, trash, or emotional items from your workspace. This creates a neutral atmosphere that supports clarity. A clean table with the sigil, contract, vessel, and a single candle is more effective than a dramatic altar filled with distractions. Ritual simplicity strengthens mental focus, which is more important than aesthetic display. Safely control the sensory environment. Dim lighting, soft background silence, or low ambient sound can help focus the mind. Avoid scents, sounds, or stimuli that evoke strong emotion unless they directly relate to the servitor's purpose. Every element in the ritual space should serve stability. The goal is calm focus, not intensity. A stable environment reduces the risk of emotional imprinting during creation. The ritual space should feel like a temporary laboratory. Keep tools minimal and intentional. A journal, pen, sigil card, vessel, and perhaps a candle or incense are all you need. This environment reinforces the psychological framework that servitor work is structured, safe, and grounded. Extraneous elements introduce symbolic noise, which weakens the construct's clarity. A well-prepared ritual space becomes the servitor's birthplace, shaping the psychological and symbolic impressions that define its early structure. By creating a calm and organized environment, you eliminate unnecessary variables and give the servitor a clean foundation. This intentional preparation strengthens your authority, enhances your focus, and ensures the servitor emerges from a state of clarity rather than emotional turbulence or environmental distraction. Grounding before creation. Before beginning the servitor creation ritual, grounding your mind and body is essential. Grounding stabilizes your emotional state and prevents accidental imprinting of stress, anxiety, or unwanted thoughts into the servitor's essence. This step ensures that your symbolic imprint comes from clarity rather than confusion. Even experienced practitioners never skip grounding because it directly affects the quality of the servitor. Start with slow, rhythmic breathing. Inhale through the nose, pause briefly, and exhale through the mouth while releasing tension. Repeat this until your body feels steady and your thoughts become calm. This breathing technique signals your nervous system to shift into a regulated state. A servitor built from calm focus will operate far more smoothly than one created from emotional turbulence. Next, deepen the grounding by connecting attention to physical sensations. Feel your weight in the chair, your feet on the floor, or your hands resting on your knees. This physical awareness keeps you anchored in your body rather than drifting too deep into visualization. Servitor creation requires mild trance, not deep dissociation. A grounded body helps the mind stay clear. It also helps to name your emotional state. Ask yourself, what am I feeling right now? Acknowledge the answer without judgment. If emotions feel intense or unstable, postpone the ritual. Servitor work should always be done when you are calm enough to maintain disciplined intention. Ignoring emotional instability increases the risk of imprinting unwanted traits into the servitor. Grounding is the psychological foundation upon which all servitor work rests. It ensures your mind is stable, your intention is clean, and your symbolic output is aligned with your goals. With grounding, you enter the ritual as a calm architect. Without grounding, you risk creating a servitor shaped by fear, desperation, or confusion. This single step dramatically improves both safety and long-term effectiveness in servitor craft. Entering the light trance state. Servitor creation requires a light trance, not a deep or ecstatic one. A light trance sharpens focus, quiets internal noise, and heightens symbolic perception without compromising awareness. This state allows you to shape the servitor's essence with precision. If the trance is too deep, emotional material may leak into the process. If too shallow, visualization may feel scattered. The balance is deliberate and important. Begin by slowing your breathing and letting your awareness soften. Focus your gaze slightly downward or let your eyes unfocus gently. The goal is relaxed attention, not disconnection. Allow your thoughts to slow naturally. You are not trying to empty the mind completely, just to make mental space for intention and visualization to rise. Use a simple mental anchor to deepen the trance. Counting down from 10, following your breath, or visualizing gentle descent can guide your mind into a calm, receptive state. Trance should feel like the space between waking and daydreaming, focused, quiet, and stable. If dizziness or dissociation arises, pause and return to grounding. Servitor work must always be done within stable awareness. Let your attention narrow onto the materials in front of you, the sigil, the vessel, the contract. This gentle inward shift helps isolate symbolic meaning from everyday concerns. The light trance fosters a state where your subconscious can engage cleanly with the work. This clarity ensures the servitor's essence forms precisely around your chosen intention. A well-maintained light trance is the ideal mental state for servitor creation. It allows you to visualize clearly, speak intention firmly, and imprint structure deeply without losing control or awareness. This trance is a controlled psychological interface, not a mystical departure. It maintains your authority and keeps the servitor grounded in discipline, clarity, and safe symbolic formation. Forming the servitor's essence. The first true step of creation is forming the servitor's essence, which begins as a point of intention. This essence is the raw symbolic core from which the servitor's structure will develop. It is not a spirit or consciousness, it is a condensed representation of your will. The way you form this essence determines how cleanly the servitor will follow your instructions later. Precision in this moment shapes the entire construct. Begin by focusing on the servitor's purpose sentence. Repeat it silently or aloud until your mind holds it effortlessly. Let the intention simplify into a single emotional or symbolic impression. This impression becomes a seed. Visualize or sense the intention condensing into a small point of light, warmth, pressure, or presence. The essence must feel singular, not fragmented or confused. Hold this point gently in your awareness. Do not force it to grow or change shape. Your task is to stabilize the intention so it feels solid and coherent. The essence should feel like a distinct symbolic presence, not a swirling of mixed emotions. If it feels scattered, return to repetition of the purpose statement until clarity returns. This step may take a few minutes but should never be rushed. When the essence feels stable, place it symbolically in front of you, above your hands, or near the sigil. This positions the intention outside your mind while keeping it anchored in your awareness. The separation helps differentiate the servitor from ordinary thoughts. You are shaping a symbolic tool, not indulging imagination. Distinguishing internal space from external symbolic space is part of the discipline. Forming the servitor's essence is the moment where intention becomes symbol, and symbol becomes structure. This single point contains the potential of the entire servitor. When formed with calm clarity, it ensures the servitor emerges from a balanced psychological state. A clean essence leads to a stable servitor, one that reflects your precise will rather than your scattered emotions or passing thoughts. This careful formation is what makes servitor craft both safe and profoundly effective. Shaping the servitor's form around its essence. Once the servitor's essence is stable, the next step is shaping its outer form. This form acts as the interface through which you interact with the servitor. It is not a physical entity but a consistent symbolic visualization that gives your intention structure. Shaping the form should feel natural and steady, not dramatic or emotionally charged. The form reinforces the servitor's identity and purpose. Begin by letting the essence expand slightly, as if it is generating a subtle glow. Do not force it to grow too much. When it feels ready, guide the glow into the shape you chose earlier, an orb, geometric symbol, small creature, or simple figure. The form should match the servitor's purpose. A focused servitor might appear as a point of sharp light, while an emotional balanced servitor could resemble a soft flame or sphere. As you shape the form, maintain emotional neutrality. You are designing a symbolic tool, not bonding with a personality. If feelings of excitement, fear, or attachment arise, pause and ground yourself. The form should feel like a stable, functional symbol, nothing more. Stability prevents the servitor from acquiring unintended emotional attributes that may complicate its operation. Observe the finished form without trying to perfect it. The servitor's shape only needs enough definition for your subconscious to recognize it reliably. Do not embellish or add complexity. The simpler the form, the more stable the servitor. If your visualization feels fuzzy, that is normal, your subconscious knows what you mean. Clarity of intention matters more than artistic detail. Shaping the servitor's form transforms its essence from pure intention into a coherent symbolic structure. The form creates a symbolic identity that stays consistent throughout the servitor's life cycle. This identity allows the servitor to operate predictably, reinforces your control, and provides a clear interface for activation and communication. A well-shaped form makes all future interactions smooth and grounded. Imprinting rules, boundaries, and purpose into the form. With the form established, the next step is imprinting the servitor's rules, purpose, and restrictions into its symbolic structure. This process is the heart of safe servitor creation. Imprinting ensures the servitor functions within precise limits and prevents symbolic drift or unintended behavior. Each rule becomes a structural reinforcement within the servitor's symbolic body. Begin by reading the servitor's purpose aloud in a calm, measured voice. As you speak, imagine the purpose sinking into the servitor's essence and form. This creates a direct connection between intention and structure. The form should feel slightly more defined or stable with each repetition. Take your time, this part forms the core of the servitor's identity. Next, read each aloud behavior from your contract. After each statement, visualize or sense the servitor's form responding subtly, brightening, vibrating, or stabilizing. These small symbolic shifts indicate alignment within your subconscious. If any allowed behavior feels vague or off, stop and rewrite it before continuing. The servitor can only follow instructions that you clearly understand. Now read the forbidden actions. As you speak each prohibition, imagine a boundary forming around or within the servitor, lines, geometric patterns, or subtle energetic walls. These boundaries restrict symbolic behavior and keep the servitor grounded, safe, and predictable. Prohibitions must be spoken firmly but calmly. They are not punishments but structural rules. Imprinting rules transforms the servitor from a symbolic idea into a functional construct governed by clear limitations. This step ensures the servitor acts only within the framework you designed. When done correctly, the servitor becomes incapable of overextending its influence or drifting into emotional territory. It becomes a safe, precise extension of your intention, engineered to operate within exact boundaries. Binding the servitor to its sigil. Binding the servitor to its sigil connects the symbolic form to a physical anchor. This step prevents the servitor from becoming an abstract mental concept that drifts unpredictably. The sigil becomes the servitor's address, operating key, and resting point. Through binding, the servitor gains stability and an unambiguous location within your symbolic system. Place the sigil before you while maintaining the servitor's form in your awareness. Visualize the servitor gently moving closer to the sigil or lowering itself onto it. The moment of contact symbolizes the merging of intention with physical symbol. This process does not trap the servitor, rather, it stabilizes its existence. The sigil becomes a bridge between your inner world and the outer ritual environment. As the form connects with the sigil, speak a simple binding statement, name, you are bound to this sigil. This symbol is your anchor, your home, and your point of interface. Speak slowly and meaningfully. Your subconscious must hear the structure clearly. The servitor should feel stable or grounded after this statement, not intense or overwhelming. Touching the sigil while visualizing the servitor's form reinforces the binding. The tactile experience signals your subconscious that this is a real, intentional connection. The sigil holds the servitor's identity cleanly and consistently, allowing you to activate, pause, or dissolve the servitor with absolute clarity. This physical point of reference becomes one of the most vital tools in the construct's life. Binding the servitor to its sigil gives the construct a fixed symbolic address and ensures every interaction flows through a clear channel. This prevents emotional projection, symbolic confusion, and mental scatter. A well-bound servitor is easier to manage, activate, and dissolve. The sigil becomes the construct's stable foundation, linking mind, intention, and ritual practice into a unified system. Binding the servitor to its vessel. After binding the servitor to its sigil, the next step is binding it to its chosen vessel. The vessel serves as the servitor's resting place when inactive. This physical anchor helps maintain structure, ensures predictable behavior, and strengthens your sense of control. The vessel does not contain a spirit, it holds symbolic meaning that guides your subconscious interaction with the servitor. Place the vessel directly on the sigil or hold both in your hands. Visualize the servitor's form resting lightly within or upon the vessel. This visualization should feel peaceful and natural. There is no force or coercion involved. You are establishing a symbolic relationship, not imprisoning anything. The vessel gives the servitor a clear location within your personal magical architecture. Speak a binding phrase such as, "Name, this vessel is your resting place. When inactive, you remain here. You activate only when I call you from this object." This direct instruction reinforces your authority. It creates a predictable pattern of operation for the servitor. Your subconscious interprets this as structure, ensuring the construct remains passive unless deliberately engaged. Gently touching the vessel while visualizing the servitor inside strengthens the symbolic connection. The tactile feedback helps embed the binding into your procedural memory. Over time, simply seeing or touching the vessel will reliably cue activation or deactivation. This prevents ambiguity and gives you total command over the servitor's presence. Binding the servitor to a vessel adds another layer of clarity and predictability. With both sigil and vessel acting as stable anchors, the servitor becomes easy to manage and entirely safe. This structure keeps the servitor grounded, reduces psychological drift, and reinforces your role as the architect of the system. Physical anchoring is one of the most powerful safety mechanisms in servitor craft. Charging the servitor for the first time. Charging activates the servitor's symbolic structure and brings it online within your psychological magical system. Charging does not empower a spirit, it reinforces intention, energizes symbolic patterns, and solidifies the servitor's operational clarity. The first charge is the most important, setting the tone for all future operation. It must be done calmly, deliberately, and without emotional turbulence. Begin charging by focusing on the servitor's sigil and vessel simultaneously. Hold the servitor's form in your mind, stable and peaceful. The goal is not to force energy but to provide steady attention. Visualization acts as a conduit between your conscious and subconscious systems. The servitor's symbolic essence strengthens as you hold it in mindful awareness. Keep your breathing slow and your posture grounded. Speak the servitor's purpose aloud while holding its form steady. Each repetition reinforces its identity and function. Charging should feel like feeding clarity into the construct, not pushing power or emotion into it. Avoid intense emotional states during charging, intensity risks imprinting unwanted traits. Calm focus ensures clean activation and consistent behavior. If you use energy work, channel it gently through your hands into the vessel. Imagine light or warmth flowing steadily into the servitor's form. Keep the energy soft, controlled, and calm. Overcharging can lead to emotional agitation, symbolic drift, or difficulty controlling the servitor later. Short, steady charging is far more effective than dramatic ritual intensity. The first charge stabilizes the servitor's identity and anchors it firmly to its purpose, rules, sigil, and vessel. When done correctly, the construct becomes a clear, cooperative extension of your will. This initial activation brings the servitor fully online in your symbolic system, setting the stage for predictable operation and safe long-term use. Charging is not about power, it is about clarity, discipline, and steady intention. Multi-day charging cycles for stability. While a single initial charge activates the servitor, multi-day charging cycles help refine its structure and strengthen its clarity. This practice is especially valuable for beginners because it introduces the servitor into your symbolic system gradually rather than all at once. The process allows intention to settle deeply and gives the subconscious time to integrate the servitor's role. Multi-day cycles are calmer, steadier, and far less prone to emotional imprinting. Each charging session should be brief. Short, focused attention is more effective than prolonged intensity. 3 to 5 minutes per day is usually optimal. During each session, hold the servitor's form, purpose, and sigil in quiet awareness. Let the visualization remain simple and neutral. The goal is repetition, not emotional power or complexity. A consistent pattern of small charges builds a stable servitor. These sessions also help you monitor your emotional and mental responses. If fatigue, anxiety, or agitation arise during charging, it may indicate that your intention or rules need refining. Multi-day cycles act like diagnostic windows. They reveal any issues before the servitor becomes fully integrated, allowing you to correct them early. This increases safety and predictability. As the days pass, you may sense the servitor becoming easier to visualize or connect with. This does not indicate consciousness but symbolic coherence. A servitor that stabilizes gradually tends to remain stable throughout its lifespan. The slow building approach mirrors muscle training. Steady repetition creates lasting strength, while sporadic intensity leads to inconsistency. Multi-day charging ensures long-term reliability. A well-structured charging cycle is one of the most powerful ways to maintain stability in servitor craft. It anchors your intention without overwhelming your emotions and allows you to refine the servitor before full activation. By approaching charging with patience and discipline, you create a construct that is resilient, gentle, and deeply aligned with your purpose. Multi-day cycles reinforce control, strengthen clarity, and ensure the servitor functions exactly as intended over time. The first activation ritual. The first activation ritual is the moment the servitor begins functioning within your symbolic system. Activation does not create consciousness or independence, it simply initiates the construct's operational behaviors. This ritual should be deliberate, calm, and free of unnecessary theatrics. The goal is to clearly signal to your subconscious, this construct is now active and performing the purpose assigned. Begin by placing the sigil and vessel before you. Hold the servitor's form gently in your awareness without forcing its appearance. Speak the servitor's name, purpose, and rules in a slow, steady tone. This vocal repetition bridges conscious intention with subconscious responsiveness. Speaking aloud reinforces your authority and sends a clear command to the symbolic framework you've built. Next, issue a simple activation phrase such as, "By my will and design, you are now active within your defined purpose." Avoid dramatic or ritualistic language that carries emotional charge. The servitor does not need ceremonial grandeur, it needs clarity. Emotional neutrality keeps the construct stable and prevents imprinting unnecessary symbolic expectations. Pause after speaking the activation phrase. Breathe, observe your internal state, and allow the moment to settle. You may feel a subtle shift in focus or a quiet sense of readiness. This is the subconscious aligning with the instruction you've given. If nothing is felt, that is equally normal. The servitor's activation depends on structure, not sensation. Trust the process rather than searching for signs. The activation ritual marks the clean and orderly beginning of the servitor's operational life. It is not a mystical awakening but a disciplined symbolic implementation of your intention. When performed with calm confidence, activation creates a seamless transition from symbolic construction to functional operation. This ritual establishes a clear psychological contract, the servitor works within defined boundaries, and you remain in full control throughout its entire lifespan. Assigning the servitor's first task. After activation, the servitor needs a clear, simple first task to calibrate its function. This task should align directly with its single purpose and be achievable within a short time frame. A successful first task establishes trust in the system and allows the subconscious to understand how to respond to the servitor's symbolic cues. Calibration through action is essential for stable operation. Choose something very small. If the servitor is designed for discipline, the first task might be, "Help me begin a 5-minute writing session today." If it is built for emotional balance, the task might be, "Support me in taking 3 slow breaths when stress arises." Small tasks prevent overextension and avoid putting unrealistic pressure on the construct or on yourself. Precision is more important than ambition. Speak the task aloud while focusing on the servitor's form and vessel. Visualize or sense the servitor acknowledging the instruction through a subtle shift or glow. This symbolic acknowledgement helps the subconscious register the new directive. Once spoken, release attachment to the outcome. The servitor influences your behavior gently in the background, it does not force action or override your will. Throughout the day, remain aware of small internal nudges or shifts relating to the task. These signals may manifest as a brief sense of readiness, a momentary increase in focus, or a subtle reminder. Do not interpret every coincidence as servitor influence, instead, look for simple behavioral support. Calibration is successful when the task feels easier or more natural to initiate. Assigning a simple first task is essential for integrating the servitor into your daily life without strain or confusion. It establishes communication between conscious intention and subconscious support, grounding the servitor's function in real behavior. A well-chosen first task creates a smooth transition from ritual space to practical action, reinforcing the servitor's purpose and confirming its operational stability. Interpreting early servitor signals. Once the servitor begins operating, you may notice subtle psychological cues related to its purpose. These signals are not supernatural signs but subconscious responses to the symbolic structure you've built. Understanding early signals helps you distinguish real servitor influence from imagination or coincidence. Clear interpretation keeps the practice grounded and prevents symbolic drift. Early signals usually appear as mild impulses, intuitive nudges, or small bursts of motivation. A focused servitor might trigger a gentle reminder or sudden readiness to begin a task. An emotional balanced servitor might help reduce tension or make you pause before reacting. These cues are often subtle and easy to miss. Do not expect dramatic changes, servitors work through cognitive shifts, not external phenomena. Some practitioners experience symbolic feelings when activating the servitor, such as warmth, pressure, or clarity. These sensations are normal but not required. They represent subconscious engagement, not energy or spirit presence. If no sensations arise, the servitor is still functioning. The key is behavioral improvement over time, not sensory feedback during ritual moments. Avoid the temptation to assign meaning to unrelated events. Coincidences, random thoughts, and dreams are often just noise. Overinterpretation leads to anxiety, projection, and instability in servitor craft. Only consider a signal meaningful if it directly aligns with the servitor's purpose and repeats in a consistent pattern. Neutral skepticism protects your clarity and emotional well-being. Interpreting early signals accurately helps you maintain a balanced perspective on servitor work. The construct influences your internal processes subtly and predictably when built correctly. By recognizing genuine cues and ignoring noise, you create a clean symbolic environment where the servitor can operate effectively. This clarity ensures that your connection remains stable, grounded, and functional without drifting into fantasy or emotional distortion. Establishing a maintenance routine. Servitors require light, consistent maintenance to remain stable and effective. Maintenance is not feeding or empowering a spirit but strengthening the symbolic pathways that support the servitor's purpose. A maintenance routine protects against symbolic drift, strengthens behavioral reinforcement, and keeps your subconscious aligned with the construct's rules and identity. Consistency matters far more than intensity. Most practitioners maintain a servitor through short, regular activations. A 30-second focus on the sigil or vessel, along with a restatement of purpose, is usually enough. This brief calibration reinforces clarity without overwhelming the mind. Maintaining a servitor should feel like tending to a tool, not managing a relationship. The tone must remain calm and neutral. Weekly or bi-weekly review sessions complement daily activations. These sessions involve reading the contract, evaluating performance, and confirming boundaries. Review prevents emotional entanglement and helps identify adjustments early. It keeps your practice disciplined and prevents drift into superstition, fear, or dependency. Servitors thrive under structured attention. If your schedule is busy, maintenance can be minimal. Servitors do not weaken from lack of ritualistic feeding. They simply fade in clarity if ignored for extended periods. When clarity fades, you can refresh the servitor with a short charging session or contract review. Maintenance is about reinforcing structure, not sustaining an entity's life force. This keeps the practice psychologically safe. A practical maintenance routine ensures the servitor remains stable and effective throughout its lifespan. By approaching the construct as a symbolic tool requiring occasional recalibration, you prevent emotional overgrowth and protect your autonomy. Maintenance strengthens trust in the system, reinforces boundaries, and ensures your servitor continues performing its function predictably and safely without becoming burdensome or intrusive. Monitoring your emotional relationship to the servitor. Monitoring your emotional state is crucial throughout servitor work. Servitors are tools, not companions or sources of comfort. Emotional attachment introduces projection, ambiguous symbolism, and psychological complications. Observing your feelings prevents the servitor from becoming an emotional crutch or imagined interlocutor. This ensures the practice supports your autonomy rather than undermining it. Begin by checking your feelings during activations. If you feel fear, excitement, dependency, or sadness, note the sensation in your journal. These emotions often signal unmet needs or unresolved internal tensions. Servitors amplify intention, not emotion, so any emotional reaction usually relates to you, not the construct. Awareness allows you to correct course before issues escalate. Pay attention to how you think about the servitor throughout the day. If you catch yourself imagining the servitor as a presence, personality, or guardian, reset your understanding immediately. Servitors do not have independent identity. Remind yourself that it is a symbolic tool that performs a single function. Keeping this boundary protects your mental clarity and emotional integrity. If you notice growing dependency or anthropomorphization, reduce activation frequency and increase grounding practices. Evaluate whether you are using the servitor to avoid personal responsibility or difficult emotions. Servitors are most effective when paired with honest self-development. Over-reliance weakens both your autonomy and the construct structure. Monitoring your emotional relationship ensures the servitor remains a clean, functional symbol rather than a repository for unresolved needs. Emotional neutrality is the healthiest stance in servitor craft. By staying aware of projections and attachments, you maintain control, clarity, and balance throughout the construct's entire lifespan. This self-awareness turns servitor work into a disciplined practice of personal mastery rather than emotional escape. Introducing the servitor into daily life. Integrating a servitor into your daily life requires subtle, predictable engagement. Servitors influence internal processes gently, not dramatically. Their integration should feel like improved focus, smoother habits, or clearer decision-making. The goal is practical reinforcement, not magical theatrics. By introducing the servitor gradually, you align your routine with the construct's purpose without overwhelming yourself. Begin by activating the servitor before tasks connected to its function. This might mean focusing on the vessel briefly before studying, speaking the activation phrase before meditation, or visualizing the servitor before emotional regulation exercises. These small rituals create reliable behavioral associations. The subconscious begins to connect the servitor with specific actions, strengthening its effectiveness. Throughout the day, remain aware of subtle cues related to the servitor's purpose. These cues are internal nudges, not external signs. The servitor may gently redirect your attention, interrupt procrastination, or steady your emotions. Treat these cues as practical reminders, not mystical messages. Servitor work is most powerful when grounded in everyday behavior rather than symbolic dramatization. Do not activate the servitor excessively. 1 or 2 activations per day is usually enough. Too many activations can create dependency or emotional entanglement. The servitor should assist your routine, not dominate it. Balance is central to maintaining psychological clarity. Integrating the servitor should feel like support, not pressure. Introducing a servitor into daily life transforms symbolic intention into observable behavior. This integration bridges ritual and reality, turning the servitor from a conceptual construct into a functional psychological tool. When introduced gradually and responsibly, the servitor becomes a natural extension of your routine, enhancing your results without disrupting your autonomy or emotional balance. Recognizing when the servitor needs adjustment. As you work with the servitor, you may notice moments when its behavior, structure, or clarity needs modification. This is normal and often part of the growth process. Recognizing the need for adjustment prevents long-term drift and keeps the construct aligned with its original purpose. Adjustments are not signs of failure, They are signs of attentive practice. The first sign is inconsistent performance. If the servitor's influence feels weak, sporadic, or unfocused, the rules may need refining. Review the contract and check for vague phrases. Rewrite any unclear statements in simpler, more direct language. Clarity resolves most performance issues. Servitors follow structure, not intention alone. Another sign is emotional discomfort during activation. If activating the servitor creates unease, strain, or pressure, something may be misaligned within its purpose, form, or boundaries. This discomfort often reflects emotional projection rather than structural defects. A grounding session followed by rule review usually resolves the issue. A third sign is symbolic drift, where the servitor begins to feel meaningful in areas outside its purpose. This may show up in dreams, intrusive thoughts, or strange associations. Symbolic drift signals that your subconscious is mixing the servitor's identity with other emotional content. Tighten boundaries, simplify the form, and restate the servitor's purpose firmly. Recognizing when a servitor needs adjustment keeps your symbolic environment clean, grounded, and functional. Servitor work is a dynamic process that responds to your emotional state, discipline, and clarity. Adjustments ensure the construct evolves in alignment with your intentions rather than your passing moods. This ongoing refinement strengthens your mastery of servitor practice and maintains the construct's stability and usefulness over time. How to modify a servitor safely. Modifying a servitor should be done with care, clarity, and emotional neutrality. Modification does not rewrite the entire construct, it fine-tunes its behavior, boundaries, or internal structure. All modifications must be performed deliberately to avoid imprinting unwanted emotional content. The goal is to correct or refine, not to reinvent the servitor from scratch. Begin by entering a grounded, light trance state. Hold the servitor's form in your awareness gently. Speak the rule or boundary you wish to modify. Rewrite the rule on paper and read it aloud slowly. Visualization helps integrate the change. Imagine the servitor's form accepting the new rule as a structural adjustment, like a line being redrawn or a boundary reinforced. Only modify one rule at a time. Changing too many aspects at once can destabilize the servitor's identity. Give your subconscious 24 to 72 hours to integrate each modification before making additional adjustments. Patience prevents confusion and ensures that changes settle in cleanly. Servitors stabilize gradually, not instantly. If the servitor's form feels wrong, overly intense, or emotionally charged, simplify it. Visualize the form shrinking, softening, or returning to a neutral shape. Removing unnecessary details creates stability. Form modification is especially helpful when symbolic drift occurs. A simpler form is always safer and more predictable for long-term operation. Safe modification keeps the servitor aligned with your intention without introducing instability or emotional projection. By approaching changes gradually, clearly, and calmly, you maintain full control over the construct's symbolic structure. This disciplined approach ensures the servitor remains a reliable tool rather than a confusing or emotionally charged presence. Modification strengthens your mastery and deepens your understanding of the symbolic mechanics behind servitor work. Detecting symbolic drift and correcting it. Symbolic drift occurs when the servitor begins to feel symbolically connected to areas outside its purpose. This drift can manifest in dreams, emotional associations, or scattered visualization. It is not a sign of danger but a sign that the servitor's boundaries need reinforcement. Detecting drift early prevents confusion and keeps the servitor's identity clean. The most common sign of symbolic drift is intrusive meaning-making. Practitioners may begin interpreting random events or emotions as messages from the servitor. This interpretation indicates that the subconscious is blending the servitor's identity with unresolved internal content. Journaling helps catch these patterns before they intensify. Writing down thoughts brings clarity to symbolic interactions. Another sign is a shift in the servitor's visual form during activation. If the form becomes more complex, dramatic, or emotional, it may indicate that the servitor has absorbed symbolic material outside its purpose. Simplifying the visualization and restating the form's original design helps restore clarity. Return to the contract and restate the servitor's rules verbally. Dream intrusions can also signal drift. If the servitor appears in dreams unrelated to its function, your mind may be using it as a symbol for internal struggles. This is corrected by grounding, restating boundaries, and reducing activation frequency for a few days. Servitors should rarely appear in dreams unless their purpose directly involves sleep routines or emotional processing. Symbolic drift is corrected through clarity, grounding, and reinforcement of boundaries. The servitor always remains safe and contained as long as you maintain your structure. By addressing drift promptly, you keep the servitor aligned with its original purpose and prevent emotional or symbolic entanglement. Correcting drift strengthens your command over the system and ensures the servitor continues functioning as a precise extension of your intention. Strengthening the servitor's purpose over time. A servitor's purpose may feel clear at first, but as you interact with it, you might discover areas where additional clarity or reinforcement would help. Strengthening the servitor's purpose does not mean changing it, rather, it means sharpening the focus so the subconscious responds with greater consistency. This refinement is especially important when you observe mild performance issues or subtle drift away from the original intention. Begin strengthening by reviewing the servitor's purpose in your journal. Read it slowly and assess whether the language feels exact, neutral, and immediately understandable. If the sentence contains abstract or emotional wording, rewrite it in simpler terms. Servitors thrive on precision. The more direct the language, the more predictable the servitor's behavior becomes. Next, repeat the clarified purpose aloud during a brief activation session. Speak it calmly and clearly while holding the servitor's form in your awareness. This reinforces the construct's identity and recalibrates its symbolic architecture. If the servitor's purpose feels sharper afterward, you have successfully strengthened it. If not, refine the wording again and repeat. You may also choose to add one supportive microtask to the servitor's operational pattern. For example, a servitor designed to assist with study discipline might benefit from an added cue to help you begin the task within 5 minutes of planning to do so. These microtasks should remain tightly related to the servitor's original purpose to avoid accidental expansion. Strengthening the servitor's purpose is a natural part of long-term use. It ensures the construct remains aligned with your evolving understanding of your goals while preventing drift or dilution. By refining intention without altering the core identity, you maintain a clean symbolic structure that operates at peak precision. This disciplined reinforcement deepens your mastery and ensures the servitor remains an effective, predictable tool throughout its defined lifespan. Adjusting the servitor's boundaries for safety. Over time, you may notice that certain boundaries need strengthening or adjusting to maintain emotional and psychological safety. Boundary refinement is completely normal and indicates that you are paying close attention to your inner world. Servitors do not break rules, but vague boundaries can lead to subtle misinterpretations. By tightening these boundaries, you reinforce your authority and maintain full control. Begin by rereading the servitor's list of forbidden actions. Evaluate whether any boundary feels too broad or open to interpretation. For example, a rule like never overwhelm me may be too vague, whereas never influence my emotions through pressure or intensity is clearer. Direct language helps your subconscious apply the boundaries with exactness. When you identify a boundary that needs adjustment, write the revised statement and speak it aloud in a calm, steady voice. Visualize the updated rule settling into the servitor's form as a structural reinforcement. This step helps embed the new limitation cleanly. Avoid rewriting many boundaries at once, adjust only what is necessary, and give the changes time to stabilize. If you feel the servitor acting outside your comfort zone, such as triggering subtle pressure, intrusive cues, or emotional heaviness, conduct a grounding session and reinforce the boundaries verbally. These corrections are not signs of danger but signals that clarity is needed. Servitors respond perfectly to clarity, and reinforcing boundaries restores their intended structure immediately. Adjusting a servitor's boundaries ensures long-term stability and emotional balance. It keeps the servitor operating within an ethical, safe, and narrow range of influence. As you grow, your understanding of what feels stable will evolve, and boundary refinement will keep the construct aligned with your highest clarity. This ongoing maintenance prevents confusion, strengthens safety, and supports responsible practice. Recognizing healthy servitor function. Healthy servitor function is subtle, predictable, and grounded. The servitor's influence should feel like gentle reinforcement rather than pressure or intrusion. Recognizing healthy operation allows you to relax into the practice and trust the structure you've created. Servitors work best when their presence is felt lightly rather than intensely. Signs of healthy function include mild increases in motivation, smoother task initiation, or more consistent emotional regulation. These changes usually appear as small behavioral shifts rather than dramatic transformations. Servitors influence the subconscious, so their impact feels natural, like a gentle nudge rather than an external force. The more grounded the shift feels, the healthier the servitor's function. Another sign of healthy function is emotional neutrality during activation. Activating the servitor should feel calm, clear, and steady. There should be no sense of tension, pressure, or expectation. If activation feels neutral, it indicates that the servitor remains grounded within its assigned boundaries and is not interfering with unrelated emotional content. Consistency is also a key indicator. A healthy servitor performs reliably under similar conditions and does not exhibit dramatic fluctuations in influence. Its effect remains steady as long as you maintain routine activations. Consistency signals that your symbolic system recognizes the servitor firmly and that the construct's identity is well formed. Healthy servitor function is subtle, stable, and free of emotional distortion. When the servitor supports your behavior in small but meaningful ways, maintains emotional neutrality, and operates with consistent reliability, you can be confident that the structure is functioning exactly as designed. Recognizing these signs builds trust in your own craftsmanship and reinforces the integrity of the practice. Recognizing signs of servitor instability. Servitor instability rarely occurs when the construct is designed well, but it can appear if boundaries are vague, emotional states were unstable during creation, or maintenance has been inconsistent. Instability is not dangerous, it simply indicates that the servitor's symbolic structure needs reinforcing. Detecting these signs early helps prevent confusion and allows for quick correction. One sign of instability is erratic behavioral influence. If the servitor's nudges feel inconsistent, overly strong, or strangely timed, it may indicate symbolic drift or weakened boundaries. This usually occurs when the intention was unclear or the rules need rewriting. Correcting instability begins with reviewing and tightening the contract. Emotional discomfort during activation is another indicator. If you feel pressured, uneasy, or energetically strained, something in the servitor's form or boundaries may need adjustment. This can also occur if you activate the servitor too frequently. Reducing activation frequency and grounding thoroughly before adjustments often resolves the issue. Instability may also manifest through symbolic complexity, such as the servitor's form becoming overly elaborate or emotionally charged during visualization. This means that unresolved internal material is mixing with the construct. Simplifying the form and restating boundaries helps restore clarity. Stability always comes from simplification, not complexity. Servitor instability is corrected by grounding, tightening boundaries, simplifying form, and restating the purpose. Recognizing these signs early keeps the practice safe, clear, and predictable. Instability does not reflect a failure, it reflects the sensitivity of symbolic systems to emotional and cognitive conditions. With disciplined correction, the servitor returns to its intended structure quickly and reliably. Identifying emotional projection onto the servitor. Emotional projection is one of the most common challenges in servitor work. This occurs when the practitioner unconsciously assigns personal emotions, fears, or desires onto the construct. Projection distorts the servitor's symbolic identity and can cause confusion about its function. Understanding projection empowers you to maintain clean boundaries and a grounded relationship with the servitor. Projection often appears as imagining the servitor having thoughts, feelings, or intentions. If you catch yourself treating it like a companion, guide, or personality, this is projection. Servitors do not have autonomous identity, they reflect structure, not emotion. Recognizing projection early keeps your symbolic system healthy and prevents attachment. Another sign is emotional dependence. If the servitor begins to feel comforting, protective, or emotionally supportive, it has absorbed symbolic content unrelated to its purpose. In this case, reduce activation frequency and focus on grounding before interacting with it again. A servitor should never substitute for emotional healing or interpersonal connection. Projection can also manifest through fear. If the servitor begins to feel intimidating or powerful, this does not mean the construct has gained strength. It means your subconscious is projecting uncertainty or unresolved tension onto the symbol. Simplifying the form and restating rules dissolves this projection quickly. Clarity neutralizes fear. Identifying projection preserves the servitor's identity and your emotional stability. Servitors must remain tools, not companions. When projection arises, it is an opportunity to deepen self-awareness and reinforce boundaries. Recognizing and correcting projection keeps the construct functioning cleanly, prevents emotional entanglement, and strengthens your mastery over symbolic practice. Reducing over-reliance and preventing dependency. Servitors should never become a psychological crutch. Over-reliance undermines your autonomy and dilutes your sense of personal capability. Dependency usually arises when a practitioner activates the servitor too frequently, interprets it as a supportive presence, or uses it to avoid emotional challenges. Preventing dependency ensures the servitor remains a tool for empowerment, not escape. Begin by observing your activation habits. If you find yourself calling on the servitor multiple times per day outside of its functional context, reduce frequency. Healthy servitor work involves deliberate, purposeful activation, not impulsive reliance. A single activation tied to a specific task is usually sufficient for consistent function. If you catch yourself seeking comfort, reassurance, or emotional support from the servitor, pause immediately. Engage in grounding, journaling, or non-magical coping practices. Servitors cannot fulfill emotional needs, and attempting to use them this way leads to projection and symbolic confusion. Restoring emotional independence strengthens both you and the construct. Setting fixed activation windows helps prevent dependency. For example, activating the servitor once in the morning and once before a specific task creates structure. When activation becomes routine rather than reactive, the servitor remains within its design boundaries. Structure protects autonomy. Preventing dependency keeps the servitor in its proper role, a functional tool for reinforcing behavior, not an emotional substitute. By setting boundaries, reducing activation frequency, and maintaining emotional independence, you keep the practice clean, safe, and empowering. This clarity strengthens your discipline and preserves the integrity of your symbolic environment. Using the servitor in high-stress situations. High-stress situations are where a servitor can be most helpful, yet they are also where misuse is most likely to occur. Stress distorts perception, making it harder to maintain clarity and boundaries. Using the servitor correctly in these moments requires discipline and emotional neutrality. The construct should support your coping skills, not replace them. When stress arises, activate the servitor only if the situation directly aligns with its purpose. If the servitor is designed for emotional regulation, activation may help steady your breathing or shift your focus. If it is built for task discipline, activation may help you regain momentum. Avoid activating servitors unrelated to the situation, as this diffuses boundaries. Keep activations brief. A short, calm statement of purpose is far more effective than intense ritual engagement during stress. Emotional turbulence increases the risk of projection, so grounding must come first. Once grounded, activation becomes a simple, clear cue the subconscious can follow without confusion. Use the servitor to support, not override, your existing coping strategies. It might help you slow down, regain clarity, or initiate needed behavior, but emotional processing and decision-making remain your responsibility. Servitors assist with regulation, not crisis management. You remain the principal actor in all high-stress contexts. Using a servitor effectively under stress strengthens the bond between symbolic structure and real-world behavior. It transforms the servitor from a purely ritual tool into a steady support mechanism integrated into your psychological toolkit. When used responsibly, the servitor reinforces resilience while preserving autonomy and emotional balance. Servitor performance evaluation. Evaluating a servitor's performance ensures it continues to function as intended. Performance evaluation is not mystical, it is practical and behavior-based. Evaluations help you determine whether adjustments are needed, whether the servitor has fulfilled its purpose, or whether it should be dissolved. Regular assessment strengthens discipline and maintains clarity. Begin by reviewing your journal notes for patterns. Look for consistent improvements in behavior, emotional regulation, or task initiation. Servitors operate subtly, so performance is measured through trends rather than dramatic events. If behavior aligns with the servitor's purpose consistently, the construct is performing well. If the servitor's influence seems weak or inconsistent, examine whether maintenance has been regular. Missed activations or emotional distractions can reduce symbolic coherence. Sometimes a brief charging session or contract review is enough to restore clarity. If inconsistency persists, adjust boundaries or simplify the form. Note whether the servitor is interfering in areas outside its purpose. Any signs of symbolic drift, appearing in unrelated thoughts, dreams, or emotions, indicate the need for correction. This drift rarely indicates instability, it simply means the subconscious is mixing symbolic material. Reviewing the contract and restating rules resolves this quickly. Performance evaluation keeps the servitor aligned with its purpose and prevents confusion or emotional entanglement. By assessing behavior trends, identifying drift, and reinforcing structure, you maintain a clean symbolic system. Regular evaluation turns servitor craft into a disciplined practice anchored in self-awareness and clarity. When to pause a servitor's activity. Pausing a servitor is a normal and healthy part of the practice. Pausing allows you to regain emotional balance, reassess intentions, or create space for other priorities. A pause does not harm the construct, it simply suspends its operation. Knowing when to pause prevents overuse, dependency, and emotional projection. Pause the servitor if your emotional state becomes unstable. Anxiety, depression, grief, or major life stress can muddy intention and distort symbolic interpretation. Giving yourself time to stabilize ensures the servitor does not absorb unwanted emotional content. Servitor craft thrives on calm neutrality. Another reason to pause is shifting priorities. If you redirect your focus to new goals, the servitor's function may become temporarily irrelevant. Pausing prevents symbolic clutter and keeps your internal system organized. When you return to the servitor, activation feels fresh and intentional. Pausing is also useful if symbolic drift or projection begins to appear. A few days without activation helps your subconscious reset. During this period, grounding, journaling, and contract review restore clarity. Once balanced, you can reactivate the servitor from a clean psychological state. Pausing the servitor protects your mental clarity and preserves the integrity of the construct. It is an essential safety mechanism that prevents emotional overload or symbolic confusion. By knowing when to pause, you maintain mastery over your symbolic tools and ensure every interaction with the servitor remains grounded and intentional. How to resume servitor activity after a pause. Resuming servitor activity after a pause requires intentional clarity. Whether you pause due to stress, symbolic drift, or shifting priorities, returning to the servitor should be done with a stable mind. Resuming incorrectly can lead to projection or confusion, while resuming correctly restores smooth operation. Begin by grounding thoroughly. Ensure your emotional state is calm and your intentions are clear. Servitors absorb the structure of the moment you engage them, so clarity is essential. Once grounded, reread the servitor's contract. This refreshes your understanding of its purpose, rules, and boundaries. Next, perform a brief review activation. Hold the servitor's form lightly and restate its purpose aloud. Keep the activation simple and neutral. Avoid introducing new rules or expectations during this first reactivation. Your goal is to re-establish the original structure, not modify it. If the servitor's form feels unfamiliar, take your time to rebuild the visualization gently. Monitor your emotional state after resuming. If the servitor feels heavy, confusing, or emotionally charged, pause again and repeat grounding. This indicates you need more time to realign with the construct's symbolic framework. When the reactivation feels neutral and steady, the servitor is fully reintegrated. Resuming activity after a pause reinforces your control and deepens your understanding of servitor mechanics. It demonstrates that you, not the servitor, govern the timing, context, and terms of engagement. A clean reactivation restores stability and ensures the servitor remains a predictable, effective extension of your intention, ready to continue fulfilling its purpose safely and reliably. Understanding servitor energy cycles. Every servitor follows a natural cycle of clarity, influence, and symbolic intensity based on your engagement level and emotional state. These cycles are not literal energy fluctuations but psychological rhythms that shape how effectively the servitor interacts with your subconscious. Understanding these cycles helps you time activations wisely, preventing strain or confusion. Servitor work becomes smoother when you recognize these natural patterns. The first cycle is the initiation phase, during which the servitor feels fresh and the influence is more noticeable. This period reflects your heightened focus and intention. As you continue interacting with the servitor, the influence becomes subtler and more integrated. The second phase is the stabilization phase, where the servitor's effects blend with your natural habits, creating predictable shifts in behavior. Occasionally, cycles of lower clarity occur. This does not mean the servitor is weakening or malfunctioning. It simply indicates that your mind has shifted focus or that emotional noise is temporarily interfering with symbolic clarity. These periods benefit from calm reinforcement, light maintenance, or brief pauses. Understanding these cycles prevents unnecessary overcorrections or emotional reactions. You may also notice that servitor influence is stronger during certain times of day or under certain emotional conditions. These patterns reflect your personal psychology, not the servitor itself. Tracking these observations in a journal helps you understand your internal rhythms. Through this awareness, you learn when activations will feel most supportive and when pauses will be most restorative. Recognizing servitor energy cycles empowers you to work with your symbolic tools rather than against them. Cycles of clarity and subtlety are part of natural subconscious processes. By observing these rhythms instead of forcing constant intensity, you create a balanced relationship with the servitor that enhances stability, reinforces clarity, and deepens your mastery of the practice. Managing servitor fatigue and overuse. While servitors do not get tired, the practitioner can experience fatigue from overactivation. Servitor fatigue occurs when you call upon the construct too frequently, especially during emotionally charged periods. This does not weaken the servitor but can temporarily strain your focus and symbolic sensitivity. Managing fatigue protects your emotional well-being and ensures the servitor remains a tool, not a source of pressure. Signs of servitor fatigue include irritability during activation, difficulty visualizing the servitor's form, or a sense of heaviness around the vessel or sigil. These signs reflect your mind's need for rest, not any flaw in the construct. When these symptoms arise, it is wise to pause or reduce activation frequency. A rested mind interacts with servitors more clearly and safely. Fatigue can also appear when using a servitor for situations outside its defined purpose. This inappropriate activation creates symbolic noise and unnecessary strain. Always activate the servitor with intention, not habit. Engaging the construct only when relevant preserves clarity and prevents subconscious confusion. Preventing servitor fatigue involves grounding, emotional self-awareness, and disciplined activation habits. Setting scheduled activation windows reduces impulsive engagement. Incorporating non-magical coping mechanisms ensures the servitor is not being overused as a substitute for practical action or emotional processing. Balance is essential. Managing servitor fatigue keeps your symbolic system functioning smoothly. By recognizing the signs early, reducing frequency, and grounding consistently, you sustain a healthy relationship with the construct. This ensures the servitor remains effective without becoming overwhelming. Responsible pacing transforms servitor work from intense effort into a sustainable, empowering long-term practice. Keeping the servitor within ethical boundaries. Ethical clarity is crucial in servitor practice. Servitors should never influence other people's emotions, decisions, or behavior. They exist to support your internal growth only. Ethical boundaries prevent psychological distortion and ensure the construct remains safe and responsible. Understanding the moral dimensions of servitor work strengthens your discipline and protects everyone involved. Start by reviewing your servitor's rules and purpose. Confirm that all instructions relate exclusively to your internal state, habits, or mindset. If any rule indirectly affects others, such as increasing charisma for manipulation, revise it immediately. Servitors are tools for self-improvement, not instruments of control. Ethical alignment reinforces stability and psychological integrity. Ethical boundaries also prevent projection. When you limit the servitor's influence to internal processes, you reduce the risk of attributing external events to the construct. This keeps your practice grounded and prevents magical thinking. When boundaries are tight, the servitor becomes easier to manage and far less likely to drift symbolically. Regularly reaffirm your ethical stance aloud or in writing. This practice reinforces moral clarity and signals to your subconscious that servitor work must remain aligned with personal responsibility. Ethical reinforcement strengthens boundaries and deepens trust in your own discipline. Keeping the servitor within ethical boundaries ensures that your practice supports growth, integrity, and self-awareness. Ethical clarity protects your psychological landscape from distortion and maintains the servitor as a clean, functional tool. When ethical principles guide your decisions, servitor work becomes a path of internal mastery rather than external influence or manipulation. How to identify psychological interference? Psychological interference occurs when unrelated emotions, personal stressors, or intrusive thoughts bleed into servitor work. This interference can distort the servitor's symbolic identity or weaken behavioral influence. Recognizing these patterns early prevents confusion, strengthens clarity, and maintains the construct's integrity. Servitor practice requires emotional neutrality, so interference must be addressed promptly. Common signs of interference include difficulty visualizing the servitor's form, emotional tension during activation, or the sudden emergence of unrelated imagery. These signs usually reflect internal distraction rather than structural instability. If they arise, pause activation and return to grounding. Emotional clarity must precede servitor engagement. Another sign of interference is symbolic contamination, where the servitor begins to feel connected to anxieties, insecurities, or life stressors. This contamination does not come from the servitor but from your subconscious projecting unresolved material. Simplifying the form and restating the purpose helps correct this quickly. Mental exhaustion or lack of focus can also trigger interference. Servitor work requires mild trance and soft focus, which become difficult when the mind is overstimulated or fatigued. Rest, sleep, and journaling help restore clarity. Once clarity returns, the servitor's form typically becomes easier to maintain. Identifying psychological interference preserves the servitor's identity and ensures you remain in full control of the symbolic process. By recognizing emotional noise and addressing it through grounding, rest, and clarity, you maintain a stable environment for servitor operation. This strengthens your mastery and prevents distortions that could complicate long-term practice. How to correct a servitor that feels off? Sometimes a servitor may feel off, not frightening, but subtly unfamiliar, hazy, or misaligned with its intended purpose. This feeling indicates symbolic drift, emotional projection, or weakened boundaries. Correcting this requires calm, deliberate action. Servitors respond perfectly to clarity, so even minor corrections can restore full stability. Begin by grounding thoroughly. Emotional neutrality is essential before attempting adjustments. Once calm, review the servitor's contract and restate each rule aloud. This reinforces the construct's original architecture. The act of speaking boundaries restores clarity in your subconscious and typically resolves minor distortions. Next, simplify the servitor's form. Visualize the form shrinking, softening, or returning to its original shape. Remove any added details that may have arisen from stress or emotional projection. Simpler forms are always safer and more stable. Once simplified, hold the form steady for a few breaths to reinforce the correction. If the servitor still feels off, conduct a short recharging session. Briefly focus on the sigil and vessel and repeat the servitor's purpose calmly. Charging reinforces the structure and recalibrates the symbolic framework. Do not overcharge, subtle reinforcement is enough. Overuse of energy work risks imprinting emotional debris. Correcting a servitor that feels off restores stability, boundaries, and clarity. These adjustments strengthen your command over the symbolic system and prevent minor distortions from developing into larger issues. A servitor that feels stable again becomes a reliable tool, fully aligned with your intention and functioning within its defined limits. When to consider early dissolution? Early dissolution should be considered if a servitor consistently feels confusing, emotionally charged, or misaligned despite adjustment attempts. Dissolution is not a failure, it is responsible practice. Ending a servitor's lifespan early prevents symbolic complications and maintains a healthy relationship with your internal system. Choosing dissolution strengthens autonomy and reinforces your authority. The first sign that dissolution may be necessary is persistent emotional discomfort during activation. If grounding, simplification, and boundary reinforcement fail to resolve discomfort, the servitor may be carrying symbolic material you do not wish to integrate. Ending the construct removes the burden cleanly. Another sign is recurring symbolic drift that disrupts sleep, visualization, or emotional stability. If the servitor repeatedly appears in unrelated dreams or thoughts, despite clear rules and corrections, dissolution is the wisest choice. This indicates your subconscious has woven the symbol too deeply into emotional territory. Early dissolution is also appropriate if the servitor's purpose becomes irrelevant due to life changes or personal breakthroughs. Keeping a servitor active beyond its usefulness creates symbolic clutter and weakens clarity. Dissolving with intention preserves the cleanliness of your internal landscape. Choosing early dissolution demonstrates maturity, responsibility, and respect for your symbolic system. It ensures that the servitor remains a supportive tool rather than a source of confusion or emotional strain. Dissolving early protects your well-being and keeps your practice grounded, disciplined, and aligned with personal growth. How to prepare for servitor dissolution. Dissolution requires emotional neutrality and clear intention. Preparing properly ensures the servitor's end is clean, respectful, and symbolically complete. This preparation also protects you from emotional entanglement or hesitation. A well-planned dissolution ritual reinforces your authority and keeps your symbolic environment stable. Begin by reviewing the servitor's contract. Read its purpose, rules, and lifespan. Acknowledge that the construct has fulfilled, or no longer aligns with, its original task. This intellectual clarity helps prevent emotional projection. Servitors do not have feelings, dissolution is simply the closing of a symbolic process. Next, gather the sigil, vessel, and journal. These physical symbols anchor the servitor's identity. Having them present reinforces the dissolution's completeness. Choose a quiet space where you can perform the ritual calmly. Emotional clarity is essential, so perform grounding if needed. Reflect briefly on what the servitor accomplished. This reflection is not gratitude to a being but acknowledgement of your own discipline and growth. It helps integrate lessons and prevents lingering emotional attachments. Keep this reflection short and neutral. Preparation frames dissolution as a responsible choice rather than an emotional moment. By reviewing the contract, gathering materials, grounding your state, and reflecting calmly, you set the stage for a clean symbolic release. This ensures the servitor dissolves smoothly, leaving no lingering psychological residue or confusion behind. The Servitor Dissolution Ritual. Dissolution is the formal end of the servitor's symbolic existence. The ritual should be simple, clear, and emotionally neutral. Its purpose is to release the servitor's structure from your symbolic system, reclaim the intention, and clear the vessel and sigil of meaning. When done properly, dissolution restores clarity and prevents symbolic remnants from interfering with your inner world. Begin by holding the sigil and vessel. Speak the servitor's name and purpose one final time. Then state clearly, your task is complete. You are now dissolved. Speaking the dissolution phrase signals to your subconscious that the construct has ended. The servitor does not resist, it simply ceases to exist as a symbolic structure. Visualize the servitor's form gently dissolving into light, dust, or mist. Watch the shape fade until nothing remains. The visualization should feel peaceful and neutral, not dramatic. The goal is symbolic completion, not emotional intensity. If the visualization feels unclear, repeat it slowly until it settles. Destroy or erase the sigil. You may burn, tear, wash, or bury it. This step removes the servitor's anchor from your physical world. The method does not matter, the intention is what dissolves the symbol. Cleanse the vessel afterward, through water, smoke, sound, or salt, removing any lingering associations. The dissolution ritual ends the servitor's symbolic life cleanly and responsibly. This closure preserves psychological clarity, prevents drift or projection, and reinforces your authority as the architect of your symbolic tools. Proper dissolution ensures your practice remains safe, grounded, and aligned with disciplined intention. Reclaiming the servitor's energy and lessons. Once dissolution is complete, the intention and effort invested in the servitor return to you. This reclamation is symbolic, not energetic. It integrates the lessons learned from the servitor's lifespan into your personal growth. Reclaiming this material strengthens self-awareness, reinforces autonomy, and prevents emotional emptiness after dissolution. Begin by reflecting on the behaviors, habits, or emotional shifts the servitor supported. Identify what improvements you can now maintain without symbolic reinforcement. A servitor's purpose is to help you internalize new patterns, not to sustain them indefinitely. Recognizing your growth ensures the lessons become part of your identity. Next, acknowledge areas where the servitor revealed your challenges. Servitors act as mirrors, revealing stumbling points and unhealed emotional patterns. Use these insights to strengthen your self-discipline and refine future intentions. This reflection transforms servitor work into a path of self-understanding rather than simple symbolic mechanics. Visualize drawing the dissolved servitor's intention back into your body as clarity or light. This visualization symbolizes reclaiming ownership of the discipline you cultivated. It also prevents psychological emptiness by reinforcing the idea that the growth came from you, not from a separate entity. This integration ensures emotional stability after dissolution. Reclaiming the servitor's energy completes the cycle of intention, manifestation, operation, and closure. It consolidates your growth, strengthens autonomy, and honors the discipline you invested in the practice. Through reclamation, you integrate the servitor's lessons as lasting personal transformation, ensuring the work enriches your life long after the construct itself has ended. Maintaining clarity after dissolution. After a servitor is dissolved, maintaining clarity is essential to prevent symbolic residue or confusion. Dissolution removes the construct, but your mind may still associate certain cues, objects, or thoughts with the servitor temporarily. Clear post-dissolution practices ensure your internal environment resets cleanly. This step protects your emotional and symbolic well-being. Begin by cleansing your ritual area and tools. Physical cleaning reinforces psychological closure. The goal is not spiritual purification but symbolic reset. A clean environment helps your subconscious release associations connected to the servitor's active period. This strengthens closure and restores neutrality. Avoid reusing the servitor's vessel immediately for a new construct. Let the object rest for a few days after cleansing. This prevents symbolic overlap and ensures the new servitor, when created, has its own identity. Giving space between projects preserves structural clarity. Monitor your thoughts for lingering associations. If you find yourself thinking about the servitor or expecting its influence, remind yourself that the construct has been dissolved. Habitual thoughts fade quickly when met with calm neutrality. Journaling helps reinforce closure by giving the mind a place to process residual patterns. Maintaining clarity after dissolution strengthens discipline, protects your symbolic environment, and honors the structure of servitor craft. Through cleansing, rest, and mindful reflection, you ensure the servitor's end is clean, complete, and emotionally neutral. Clear closure prevents confusion and supports a healthy transition into your next phase of practice. Integrating servitor work into long-term practice. Once you have created, maintained, and dissolved one or more servitors, the next step is integrating the practice into your long-term path. Servitor craft is not meant to be used constantly or impulsively. It is a structured toolset that supports specific phases of development. Integration involves knowing when to use a servitor, when not to use one, and how to align the system with broader magical or psychological practices. Begin by reflecting on what servitor work has taught you about your mind, habits, and symbolic responsiveness. These insights form the foundation for long-term integration. Servitor craft reveals where your discipline is strong and where it needs reinforcement. Recognizing these patterns helps you choose future servitor purposes wisely, ensuring they support your evolution rather than distract from it. Next, incorporate the principles of servitor structure, clarity, intention, boundaries, and ethical focus into other areas of your path. These principles strengthen all magical and psychological work. They improve ritual clarity, reduce emotional projection, and sharpen your sense of internal structure. Servitor craft serves as a microcosm of disciplined practice. Use servitors sparingly. Let each construct serve a specific purpose, then dissolve it when complete. Periods of servitor work should alternate with periods of reflection, grounding, and mundane self-development. This rhythm prevents symbolic overload and strengthens your ability to grow without relying excessively on external constructs. Each servitor should be part of a larger progression, not a constant presence. Integrating servitor work into your long-term path transforms it from a single technique into a disciplined framework for self-mastery. Through thoughtful timing, ethical alignment, and structured reflection, servitor craft becomes a tool that supports lifelong growth. It teaches clarity, responsibility, and emotional balance, strengthening your capacity to shape your life intentionally. When integrated properly, servitors become pivotal stepping stones on the path toward deep personal transformation. When you are ready for creating multiple servitors. Creating multiple servitors requires emotional stability, clarity of mind, and a proven track record of responsible practice. Most practitioners should begin with only one construct at a time. Once you have created, maintained, and dissolved at least one servitor successfully, you may be ready to introduce a second. Working with multiple servitors requires strong boundaries, organizational ability, and disciplined self-awareness. The first step is determining whether you genuinely need more than one servitor. A second servitor should address a purpose entirely separate from the first. Never create constructs with overlapping or competing functions. Overlap leads to symbolic confusion and destabilizes the system. Ensure each servitor has a single, distinct purpose that you can clearly state in one sentence. Next, create separate sigils, vessels, and contracts for each servitor. Never share or reuse symbolic components. This separation ensures the constructs remain independent within your symbolic architecture. Assign different activation methods, rules, and lifespans to maintain clarity. Organization is crucial. Keep detailed journal notes to track interactions and progress. Monitor your emotional reactions carefully. Working with multiple servitors increases the risk of projection, confusion, and symbolic drift. If you feel overwhelmed or emotionally entangled with the constructs, dissolve or pause one of them immediately. It is better to scale back than to push into symbolic overload. Boundaries are the backbone of safe multi-servitor practice. You are ready for multiple servitors only when you can maintain full clarity, grounded emotional control, and strict boundaries. Working with more than one construct deepens your understanding of symbolic architecture and reinforces disciplined practice. When approached responsibly, multiple servitors become a powerful system for supporting many dimensions of your personal growth, each construct working in clean, clearly defined lanes that do not interfere with one another. Creating a multi-servitor system. A multi-servitor system is an advanced structure in which several servitors work in coordinated but non-overlapping ways. This system requires high levels of discipline and clarity. It is not necessary for most practitioners, but those who develop strong symbolic control may find it useful for long-term goals. A multi-servitor system emphasizes structure, boundaries, and comparative purpose design. Begin by mapping out each servitor's role in writing. Draw a chart showing each construct, its purpose, its vessel, its sigil, its activation phrase, and its lifespan. This visual overview prevents overlap and clarifies relationships. Servitors within a system should never interact with or influence one another. Each should operate as an isolated symbolic program. Next, design distinct activation schedules. For example, you might activate one servitor in the morning for productivity and another in the evening for emotional regulation. Keeping their operations in separate time windows prevents symbolic interference. Establish routines, not spontaneity. Structure is what stabilizes the system. Maintain a strict journal for system-wide monitoring. Record observations for each servitor separately. If you notice symbolic drift, emotional projection, or overlapping associations between constructs, reinforce boundaries immediately. Multi-servitor systems magnify mistakes, so vigilance is essential. A multi-servitor system functions best when each construct has a clear role and is activated deliberately within its designated context. This layered symbolic architecture must remain organized, ethical, and carefully monitored. When built properly, a multi-servitor system becomes a sophisticated internal support framework, reflecting deep discipline and refined mastery over symbolic practice. Keeping servitors distinct and preventing cross-contamination. Cross-contamination occurs when symbolic material from one servitor drifts into another's identity, boundaries, or form. This happens when constructs overlap in purpose, share symbolic components, or are activated too closely in time. Preventing cross-contamination is crucial for maintaining safe and stable multi-servitor work. Distinctness keeps each construct precise, predictable, and healthy. Start by giving each servitor a unique symbolic identity. Use different colors, shapes, elements, or symbolic styles in their sigils and forms. Avoid using similar vessels or repetitive activation phrases. Clear differentiation helps your subconscious separate the constructs cleanly. Symbolic variety reinforces structural division. Next, create separation in time. Do not activate multiple servitors back-to-back unless absolutely necessary. Give at least an hour between activations to allow your mind to reset. This prevents symbolic blending and ensures you approach each servitor with fresh clarity. Time separation is one of the most effective tools for maintaining construct independence. Monitor your feelings and mental imagery. If one servitor begins appearing in the symbolic space belonging to another, pause both constructs and re-establish boundaries. Clarify each form, reread each contract, and reinforce the separateness verbally. This prevents contamination from escalating into symbolic confusion. Keeping servitors distinct strengthens clarity and makes long-term symbolic work significantly safer. Distinct constructs are easier to manage, easier to dissolve, and less likely to drift into emotional territory. By maintaining symbolic diversity, temporal separation, and consistent monitoring, you ensure every servitor remains a clean, self-contained tool that operates within its own clearly defined domain. Ethical considerations for multi-servitor work. When working with multiple servitors, ethical clarity becomes even more important. Ethical boundaries prevent misuse of symbolic power, projection onto constructs, and unintentional manipulation of others. Serving your own growth ethically ensures that servitor work remains aligned with integrity and personal responsibility. Ethics stabilize the entire system. Begin by reaffirming that servitors must influence only your internal processes. This rule becomes even more critical in a multi-construct environment, where the temptation to externalize symbolic influence increases. Servitors should never influence the thoughts, emotions, or behaviors of anyone else. Ethical boundaries create psychological and spiritual safety. Monitor whether any servitor's purpose indirectly affects others. For example, a servitor designed to enhance persuasion or charisma may unwittingly cross ethical lines. When in doubt, revise the purpose to focus on internal skills rather than external outcomes. Ethical clarity prevents long-term complications and protects your emotional integrity. Keep your intentions transparent with yourself. Multi-servitor systems can create a sense of symbolic power. Without ethical grounding, this feeling can distort judgment. Regularly reflect on your motives. Ask whether you are using servitors to escape responsibility or control situations that should be approached through direct, honest communication. Ethical discipline strengthens the foundation of multi-servitor work. It ensures each construct supports growth without venturing into manipulation or projection. By upholding strict ethical boundaries, you align your symbolic system with integrity, clarity, and responsibility. Ethical practice becomes a stabilizing force, safeguarding your psychological well-being and preserving the purity of servitor craft. How to avoid servitor overload when working with many constructs. Servitor overload happens when the practitioner attempts to manage too many constructs simultaneously. The mind becomes cluttered, boundaries blur, and symbolic clarity weakens. Avoiding overload requires honest self-assessment, clear organization, and disciplined limitations. Servitor craft rewards precision, not quantity. Working with fewer, cleaner constructs is always safer than juggling many. Begin by limiting yourself to 2 servitors at any time unless you have extensive experience. More than two constructs greatly increases the risk of projection, drift, and confusion. Mastering one or two servitors is far more effective than spreading attention thin across several. Depth outperforms breadth in symbolic work. Track how much mental space your servitors occupy. If you find yourself thinking about them too often, confusing their purposes, or mixing up their activation cues, pause or dissolve one. Servitor work must never dominate your psychological landscape. Constructs should feel like subtle tools, not constant companions. Use structured schedules to prevent overload. Assign different days or times for each servitor's activation and maintenance. This creates compartmentalization and prevents mental blending. If your schedule begins feeling crowded, reduce activation frequency or put one servitor into standby. Avoiding overload protects your emotional stability and preserves the integrity of your symbolic system. Servitor work should feel light, clean, and well organized. By managing your constructs responsibly, limiting their number, and listening to your inner state, you ensure the system remains sustainable. Clarity is the cornerstone of mastery, and avoiding overload keeps your entire practice grounded in strength and precision. Safely retiring a multi-servitor system. When a multi-servitor system has served its purpose, it must be retired carefully. Dissolving multiple constructs requires additional clarity to prevent symbolic remnants from lingering or blending. A systematic approach ensures each servitor ends cleanly, without leaving psychological clutter. Retiring the system reinforces your authority and the finite nature of symbolic constructs. Begin by dissolving the servitors one at a time. Never attempt to dissolve several simultaneously. Focus on one construct, perform the dissolution ritual with full attention, and then allow a day or more before dissolving the next. This pacing prevents emotional overload and symbolic confusion. After dissolving each servitor, cleanse its vessel and destroy its sigil as usual. Keep the vessels separate until the entire system is retired. Mixing them prematurely risks symbolic residue, especially if the constructs had different purposes. Treat each dissolution as its own respectful closure. Reflect after each ritual. Note which lessons each servitor taught you. These reflections help integrate the learned disciplines into your long-term practice. Retiring a system is an opportunity to consolidate growth and identify new pathways. Once all constructs are dissolved, cleanse your ritual space to reset your internal environment. Retiring a multi-servitor system symbolizes a transition in your path. It reinforces that servitors are temporary tools, not permanent companions. Closing the system responsibly strengthens your psychological discipline and preserves symbolic clarity. The retirement process itself becomes a milestone in your evolution, marking the successful completion of a complex, structured practice rooted in clarity and mastery. Reviewing what you learned from your servitors. Reflection is a powerful tool in servitor craft. Reviewing your experiences provides insights into your mind, emotions, and behavioral patterns. Every servitor, whether successful or challenging, reveals something meaningful. Reflection turns symbolic practice into self-knowledge. This step completes the servitor cycle and deepens your mastery. Begin by rereading all journal entries related to the servitor or system. Look for themes, improvements in behavior, emotional breakthroughs, or recurring challenges. These themes reveal how your subconscious interacts with symbolism. Understanding these patterns strengthens your next servitor creation and enhances general self-awareness. Identify what worked well. Did the servitor improve discipline, emotional regulation, or creativity? Recognizing effective patterns helps you design future constructs more effectively. Identify what didn't work well too. Unsuccessful moments often highlight vague intentions, weak boundaries, or emotional instability. These lessons refine your practice. Reflect on how your emotional relationship with the servitor changed over time. Did you maintain neutrality? Were there moments of projection or dependency? These insights deepen your understanding of your psyche and help prevent similar challenges in the future. Reflection is not about judgment but observation. Reviewing what you learned transforms servitor craft from a technical system into a path of growth. Insights become tools for strengthening future constructs and improving your psychological discipline. Through reflection, you integrate the practice into your deeper wisdom, ensuring each servitor contributes to a larger evolution of clarity, responsibility, and internal alignment. Building personal servitor design principles. Over time, you will develop your own design principles based on experience. Servitor craft is both structured and personal. What works well for one practitioner may not work best for another. Building your own system ensures your servitors align perfectly with your psychology, values, and symbolic language. Personal principles evolve through experimentation, reflection, and disciplined self-awareness. Begin by listing the practices that consistently produce stable servitors. This might include certain visualization styles, preferred vessel types, specific ritual sequences, or unique activation phrases. These patterns become part of your personal design language, a customized symbolic structure that shapes all future constructs. Next, identify practices that consistently cause problems. Perhaps certain forms lead to projection, or certain emotional states disrupt clarity. Understanding your pitfalls is just as important as understanding your strengths. Avoiding known challenges keeps your symbolic system clean and stable. Refine your approach through iteration. After each servitor, adjust your principles to incorporate new insights. Treat your design philosophy as an evolving system rather than a fixed doctrine. Flexibility strengthens mastery and prevents stagnation. Developing personal design principles transforms servitor work into a sophisticated personal art. Your symbolic architecture becomes tailored to your mind, enhancing predictability, clarity, and effectiveness. Through disciplined refinement, you grow into a practitioner with a uniquely effective methodology, a mastery forged through experience, self-awareness, and continuous evolution. The evolution of your path through servitor craft. Servitor craft is ultimately a path of self-mastery. The constructs you build reflect your intentions, emotional clarity, and capacity for disciplined structure. As you progress, the servitor system becomes more than a toolset, it becomes a mirror of your inner evolution. The practice shapes you as much as you shape it. The lessons you gain continue long after each servitor dissolves. You evolve by learning to direct your intention with precision. Servitor work teaches you how to focus your mind, articulate your goals, and maintain boundaries. These skills extend far beyond symbolic practice. They enhance every aspect of life, relationships, creativity, emotional regulation, and personal growth. Precision becomes a way of living. The path deepens as you confront emotional patterns. Servitors reveal projections, fears, and tendencies toward avoidance or over-reliance. By recognizing these patterns and correcting them, you grow in self-awareness. The practice becomes a journey toward emotional maturity. Servitor craft makes the subconscious visible. Over time, you develop a disciplined relationship with symbolism itself. This discipline strengthens your intuition, improves your ritual work, and enhances your psychological resilience. Symbolic systems that once felt abstract become powerful frameworks for transformation. Servitor work becomes a cornerstone of a grounded, intentional path. The evolution of your path through servitor craft is a testament to your discipline, clarity, and willingness to grow. Servitors are temporary, but the transformation they facilitate is lasting. Through intention, structure, and reflection, you emerge stronger, clearer, and more aligned with your higher purpose. Servitor craft shapes not only your practice, but your entire relationship with the inner world, and through that, with life itself. Step-by-step guide. Emotional readiness check. Before constructing or modifying a servitor, perform a simple emotional check. Sit down, take 3 slow breaths, and honestly rate your emotional state on a scale from 1 to 10, where 1 is completely numb and 10 is overwhelmed. If you are below 4 or above 7, postpone the work. This automatically prevents servitor creation during emotional extremes, where symbolic distortion is most likely. Next, scan the last 12 hours of your day. List 3 events that still feel charged in your body or thoughts. If any of them trigger strong reactions when recalled, acknowledge that the residue is still active. Decide whether you need grounding, rest, food, or distance before working. If so, take at least 15 minutes to address those needs before continuing. This breaks the momentum of emotional carryover. Now ask yourself one direct question: am I trying to build or adjust this servitor to escape something I do not want to face? Do not rationalize the answer. If the honest response is yes, write that down and hit pause on the work. Identify the real issue, and note one non-magic action you can take about it tomorrow. This keeps servitor work from becoming a coping mechanism. If your emotional state feels steady, your recent events feel processed enough, and your motive is not escape, give yourself a verbal green light. I am emotionally ready to shape this construct. If any of those 3 checks fail, give yourself a red light and reschedule. There is no benefit in forcing servitor work through a red state. Repeat this exact process every time you do serious servitor construction or revision. Over time it becomes a quick internal filter. If you do not pass the rating, residue, and motive checks, you simply do not work. This one habit prevents most long-term problems by making sure every servitor is born or adjusted in a controlled emotional climate, rather than in the middle of a storm you will later regret encoding. Grounding ritual before work. Start by grounding the body. Sit in a chair with your feet flat on the floor or stand with your weight evenly distributed. Place your hands on your thighs or at your sides. Inhale through your nose for a count of 4, hold for 1, exhale through your mouth for 6. Repeat this breathing pattern 10 times. Feel your muscles unlock with each exhale and let your posture settle into something stable but not rigid. Next, ground the mind. Close your eyes or soften your gaze and notice whatever thoughts are moving through. Do not follow them or argue with them. Imagine each thought as text on a screen that scrolls past and disappears on its own. Spend 2 or 3 minutes simply watching thoughts arrive and leave without doing anything about them. When you feel a gap between you and the thoughts, move on. Then, ground the emotions. Name whatever is present in 1 or 2 words: irritated, tired, calm, flat, sad, fine. Do not judge it. Imagine gently placing that emotion on a shelf beside you for later. You are not killing it or denying it, you are parking it for the duration of the work. Say quietly, "I will return to you after this session." This separation keeps your emotional weather from seeping into the servitor. Now claim authority. Place one hand over your chest or on the table in front of you and state, "This work is mine. My intention controls this construct. Nothing else writes into it." Say it once slowly. Feel the difference between drifting and choosing. This step matters more than any candle or incense you will ever use. Finish the grounding ritual by checking in: do I feel present in my body, quiet enough in my mind, and separate from my current emotions? If the answer is yes, you proceed. If the answer is no, repeat the breathing and mental watching, or postpone the session. This pre-ritual becomes your standard pre-flight checklist: body steady, mind unhooked, emotion parked, authority claimed. Only then do you touch servitor structure. Activation context setup. First, pick one activation location. This can be a specific chair, desk, meditation cushion, or even a particular corner of your room. The rule is simple: you will only formally activate this servitor when you are in that location or deliberately adopting that posture. Write down: servitor name, activates only when I am at /in, location. This creates a physical anchor that your subconscious can consistently recognize. Second, choose a unique activation phrase. It should be short, neutral, and never used in any other magic or self-talk. Something like begin assigned function, name, or run program, name, now works well. Write that phrase verbatim into the servitor's contract. From now on, you will not activate the servitor with thoughts, feelings, or vague wishes, only with that exact sentence spoken aloud or clearly in your mind. Third, define the trigger conditions. Decide exactly when it is appropriate to use the servitor: only during focused work, only when I intentionally start my morning routine, or only when I sit to meditate. Write one clear sentence: name, may be activated only when I am doing, specific context. This prevents the servitor from becoming an all-purpose background influence and keeps its use tied to discrete moments. Fourth, create a matching deactivation phrase. Again, keep it simple and unique: stand down, name. Or end function, name. Add a line to the contract: upon hearing this phrase, name, immediately ceases operation and returns to a dormant state. Commit to always using it at the end of a session, even if you feel like you do not need to. This habit teaches your system that nothing runs indefinitely. Finally, test the context once without doing real work. Go to your chosen location, speak the activation phrase, imagine the servitor turning on, then after 1 minute speak the deactivation phrase and imagine it going completely off. Notice how it feels to have start and stop points. From now on, you never activate outside that context, never skip the shutdown phrase, and never change the wording. If you want to adjust context later, you do it consciously in a formal revision, not on the fly. Purpose refinement process. Start by writing your servitor's purpose as you instinctively think of it. Do not edit yet. For example, help me be more productive and confident every day. Get the messy version on paper. This raw statement shows you how broad, emotional, and external your first draft tends to be. You will refine from here, not from an abstract idea of perfection. Next, strip out everything external. Cross out any part that refers to other people, results in the outside world, or circumstances you cannot directly control. If your sentence includes phrases like get people to, make others, or attract, remove them. You are left with only what concerns your own internal behaviors and states. This immediately moves the servitor into safe territory. Then, separate emotion from action. Underline emotional words like confident, motivated, secure, or calm. On a second line, rewrite the sentence using only actions. Begin work within 5 minutes of sitting down, finish one planned block before checking my phone, sit for 10 minutes of stillness each night. If you cannot express it as an action you can see yourself doing, it is not ready to be a servitor purpose. Now compress the behavioral version into one clean sentence of internal scope, such as, name, reinforces my habit of starting focused work within 5 minutes of sitting at my desk. This is narrow, measurable, and entirely inside you. It is not emotionally defined, does not involve other people, and does not rely on vague concepts like success or greatness. It is something you can clearly say either happened or did not happen. Finally, stress test the refined purpose. Ask 3 questions. Can this be observed as a behavior? Does this depend only on me? And could this exhaust or pressure me if active too often? If the behavior is observable, internal, and balanced enough to run repeatedly without strain, you keep it. If not, you shrink or soften it until it meets those 3 checks. You then copy that final one-sentence purpose into the contract. All later instructions, boundaries, and activation rules will be built around this refined core. Multi-layer boundary design. Begin with the permission layer. Write, name, is only allowed to influence the following. List 2 to 4 very specific internal behaviors tied to the purpose. For example, starting tasks within 5 minutes, staying seated until one block is complete, and redirecting attention back to the task when distracted. This is the only sandbox the servitor is allowed to operate in. Anything not listed is off limits by default. Next, add the prohibition layer. Write a separate list titled Forbidden Domains. Include items like dreams, emotions themselves, relationships, my sense of self-worth, other servitors, physical sensations, external events. State clearly, name, will never operate in or attempt to affect any of the above. The goal is to wall the servitor off from areas where symbolic blending and psychological problems usually begin. Then, design your failsafe layer. Create at least 3 automatic shutdown conditions, such as, if I feel uncomfortable pressure from, name, it deactivates immediately, if, name, seems to trigger outside its activation context, it shuts down, and if I intentionally say full stop, name, it dissolves permanently. Write these as non-negotiable rules. These act as emergency brakes built into the system. After that, define the lifespan and review layer. Decide how long this servitor will run before mandatory evaluation, 30 days, 60 days, or tied to a specific project. Write, name, will operate for, time frame, after which I will pause use, review performance, and either renew, revise, or dissolve it. This keeps any construct from running unchecked into the background of your mind. Finally, copy all 4 layers, permissions, prohibitions, fail-safes, and lifespan, into one clean contract page. Read them aloud slowly once. When you construct or adjust the servitor, you are not just visualizing, you are binding it to this written structure. Anytime something feels off in practice, you come back to this page first. If behavior does not match these layers, you treat it as a contract breach and either correct, reset, or dissolve. Operational cycle setup. Start by defining a single activation window. Decide when this servitor is meant to be active, for example, during my morning work block or only when I sit down to write. Write, name, may only be activated during specific time block or activity. This prevents it from bleeding into unrelated parts of your day. The tighter the window, the easier it is to keep the construct under control. Next, define the maximum active duration per session. Decide whether the servitor runs for a fixed time, like 45 minutes, or until a clear task is complete, like one written page or one finished routine. Write, each activation of name lasts no longer than duration, or until task is completed, whichever comes first. This stops it from staying on until you remember to turn it off. Then, build the rest phase into the contract. Choose a minimum rest period after each activation, such as 15 minutes, 1 hour, or the rest of the day. Write, after each activation, name remains inactive for at least rest period. It cannot be reactivated during this time. This keeps your system from leaning on the servitor constantly and prevents symbolic saturation. After that, create weekly or bi-weekly review checkpoints. Put a simple recurring note on your calendar, review, name. During that review, check if activation windows are respected, durations are appropriate, and rest is happening. Note any feelings of pressure, dependency, or creep into other domains. If anything looks off, you adjust the cycle or prepare for dissolution. Finally, test one full cycle deliberately. On a chosen day, go to your activation context, use the activation phrase, let the servitor run for one defined block, speak the deactivation phrase, and then honor the rest period without cheating. Notice how it feels to have a complete, closed loop. From that point forward, you do not activate outside the window, do not exceed duration, and do not skip rest. The cycle becomes as important as the purpose itself. Drift monitoring routine. Create a dedicated servitor log. Give it a page or document with the servitor's name at the top. Every time you intentionally activate the servitor, jot down the date, time, context, and what you expected it to help with. After the session, add one line about how it actually felt and what happened. Do not overanalyze, just capture patterns. Over weeks, this gives you hard data instead of vague impressions. Once a week, read back through the last 7 days of entries. Highlight any moments where the servitor seemed to show up outside activation context, produce pressure instead of support, or feel different from its original design. These highlights show possible drift points. Note whether they cluster around specific moods, times of day, or life events. Drift almost always follows patterns. Next, compare your findings to the contract. Reread the purpose sentence, allowed domains, forbidden domains, and fail-safes. Ask, is name still behaving inside this structure? If the answer is yes, the sensation may be you adjusting to new habits. If the answer is no, you treat it as a boundary breach, not a mystery. Breach means you either correct the pattern or terminate the construct. If drift seems mild and recent, try a correction round. For the next week, tighten context, strictly enforce activation and deactivation phrases, and shorten duration slightly. Read the contract aloud once before each activation. Log carefully. If the servitor's behavior returns fully to contract, you keep it. If not, the construct has become structurally unreliable. If drift persists after correction, initiate dissolution steps rather than negotiating with a symbolic pattern that no longer respects form. Treat this as routine maintenance, not drama. The point of this routine is simple: you do not guess about drift. You measure, compare to the written structure, attempt one correction pass, and if it fails, you take the servitor down cleanly and rebuild later with tighter design. Identity Reinforcement Protocol. Begin by restating the servitor's purpose out loud exactly as written in the contract. Speak slowly and clearly once, visualizing the simplest possible version of its form as you do so. Do not embellish the form, keep it to whatever base shape, color, or symbol you originally chose. This relinks the servitor's job description to its visual identity in your subconscious, refreshing alignment. Next, review the allowed domain list. Read each allowed behavior or internal influence line by line. As you read each line, briefly imagine the servitor acting only within the behavior, nothing extra, nothing outside. This reconfirms that its operation is constrained. Once again, keep visualization simple. Overly complex imagery invites projection, simple imagery reinforces structure. Then, review the forbidden domains. Read them in one clean pass, ending with a firm sentence like, "Name, will never act in any of these areas." Do not visualize dramatic barriers or battles, just state the facts. The point is to remind your system where the servitor does not belong. This keeps it psychologically separate from your emotions, relationships, and identity. After that, lightly recharge the construct. Place your hand on the written sigil or vessel, breathe calmly for 10 to 20 seconds, and think. Continue to perform only your assigned function within your assigned limits. You are not flooding it with emotional energy, you are reasserting correct behavior. Stop as soon as the sentence is complete. Overcharging with emotion blurs identity instead of strengthening it. Finally, schedule this reinforcement protocol at regular intervals, for example, once a week for the first month and then once every 2 weeks. Each session should be short, focused, and free from emotional drama. Over time, this protocol keeps the servitor crisp instead of fuzzy, aligned instead of wandering, and subordinate to its written structure instead of to your passing moods or unconscious patterns. Long-term use safety check. Start by defining a maximum total lifespan for the servitor, even if you plan to renew it. For example, this servitor will operate for 90 days before mandatory dissolution or redesign. Put that date on a calendar. This ensures that no construct becomes an indefinite background program in your psyche. Long-term safety starts by refusing to let anything run forever. Next, set a regular review rhythm, like once every 1 or 2 weeks. At each review, answer 3 questions in writing. Is this servitor still needed? Is it still behaving according to the contract? And do I feel more dependent on it than when I began? If any answer trends in the wrong direction, no longer needed, contract violations, or rising dependence, you flag it for possible retirement or redesign. Then, periodically reduce usage on purpose. For 1 week each month, cut activation frequency in half. Watch how your system behaves. If your functioning collapses without the servitor, you have allowed dependence. A healthy construct reinforces skills you can increasingly perform without it. A dependent pattern suggests it is time to wind it down and internalize its role. Also, monitor your emotional reaction to the idea of dissolving it. If imagining dissolution causes panic, grief, or resistance, treat that as a warning. A tool should not feel like a friend or a piece of your identity. When that attachment forms, you are no longer dealing with a clean symbolic helper but with a fused pattern that needs careful unwinding. Finally, when a review shows that usefulness has peaked, dependence is rising, or contract violations are appearing, you plan dissolution rather than ignoring the signs. You set a date, adjust usage downward leading into it, and then follow your dissolution steps. Long-term safety is not about keeping every servitor forever, it is about using them for specific arcs and letting them go before they entangle too deeply. Step-by-step dissolution procedure. First, formally announce your decision to dissolve the servitor in writing. Open your log and write a short statement. I am dissolving, name, because, brief reason, purpose fulfilled, drift, or no longer needed. This locks the choice into consciousness and prevents indecision from weakening the process. You are declaring the life cycle complete, not negotiating with it. Next, deactivate and retire the activation context. Go to the usual spot where you work with this servitor, speak the deactivation phrase once, and then state, name, will never again be activated. Its function is complete. From this moment, you agree never to use the activation phrase again. This cuts the main behavioral path that once woke the servitor. Then, dismantle the identity link. Take the contract page that contains its purpose, boundaries, and rules, and either tear it up or mark a large X over it with the word dissolved and today's date. While you do this, visualize the servitor's simple form fading, dissolving, or disassembling into neutral light or dust. You are not sending it anywhere, you are breaking down a pattern back into raw symbolic material. After that, clear the vessel or sigil. If you used a physical object, hold it and say, "You are now just, stone, coin, token." All previous associations are cleared. Either cleanse it by your preferred method for reuse or store/dispose of it as an ordinary object with no ritual meaning. If you used only a drawn sigil, you may burn, shred, or ink it out completely. The point is to remove any lingering anchor. Finally, perform a brief grounding and integration step. Sit, breathe, and acknowledge what the servitor helped you practice, the habits, behaviors, or states it reinforced. Say, "These abilities now belong to me directly." Visualize those behaviors settling into your own body and mind, independent of any construct. Then close the work and do not revisit the servitor mentally. If thoughts of it arise, you remind yourself, that pattern is dissolved, and return focus to your current life and skills. Designing a simple productivity servitor. Begin by naming the exact productivity problem you want to address in one sentence. For example, "I delay starting important tasks even when I have time." Do not generalize yet. Identify the stuck point. This specificity will guide every later step. A servitor that tackles productivity in general will be vague, one that tackles starting tasks within 5 minutes will be sharp and usable. Next, turn that problem into a single, internal behavioral goal. For example, "I want to start my chosen task within 5 minutes of sitting down to work." Write that down as a target behavior. Make sure you can clearly observe whether it happened or not. If it still sounds fuzzy, tighten it until it becomes binary, either you did it or you didn't. Then, run it through the refinement process, remove emotion, remove external influence, and make sure it is sustainable. The final one-sentence purpose might read, "Name, reinforces my habit of beginning my planned task within 5 minutes of sitting at my desk." Check that this sentence involves only you, only behavior, and is realistic enough to repeat daily without burnout. After that, create a minimal visual and symbolic identity for this specific servitor, a small glowing dot, a simple geometric shape, or a tiny spark that lights up on your desk in your mind's eye. Do not give it a face, personality, or story. Pick a neutral name, like prompter or a nonsense syllable, and write, "Name, is represented by, shape/color, and exists only to fulfill the stated purpose." Finally, wrap this specific use case back into your general system, give it activation context, "Only when I sit at my desk with a chosen task," a clear cue and shutdown phrase, and boundary layers. You now have one concrete, tightly focused productivity servitor whose only job is to help you start on time. If you later need help with other parts of productivity, you build separate constructs rather than bloating this one. Designing a simple focus servitor. Start by defining the exact focus problem you experience. Write it as a single sentence, such as, "I keep drifting to my phone or random tabs when I should be working." Naming the exact failure mode gives you something you can design against. Bad focus is too vague, checking my phone every few minutes is targetable. Next, translate that problem into one internal behavioral goal. For instance, "Stay on my current task for 25 minutes without checking my phone or unrelated apps." This becomes the central behavior you want supported. It is clear, measurable, and entirely under your control. If you cannot express it simply, refine until you can. Then, refine it through the same rules. Strictly internal, behavior-based, and sustainable. The final purpose sentence might be, "Name, supports my ability to remain on the current task for at least 25 minutes without switching to distractions." Check that this is realistic in your current life. If not, reduce the time window and build up gradually. After that, assign a simple visual identity, perhaps a small ring of light around your head or a dim tunnel that narrows around your task. Choose a neutral, non-human name. Write, name, is represented by, symbol, and its only function is to sustain single task focus within the defined window. Add this to your servitor contract structure. Finally, bind it into your working pattern. Activation might occur only when you start a work block timer, with an activation phrase like lock focus, name, for this block. Deactivation happens when the timer ends with a phrase like focus complete, name, stand down. With this, you now have a simple, focused servitor tied tightly to a single behavior, not allowing your attention to scatter during small, defined windows. Designing a simple sleep onset servitor. First, identify your exact sleep problem in one sentence. For example, I lie in bed for over an hour unable to disengage from thoughts. This names the moment where support is needed, transition, not the entire night. Servitors should not control your full sleep architecture, they should assist specific behavioral transitions that you already understand. Next, define the internal behavior you want reinforced. An example, remain in a low stimulation, still position, with lights off, for 30 minutes without picking up my phone or leaving the bed. This is an action pattern, not the outcome of falling asleep. Your servitor will help hold this pattern, sleep itself is handled by your biology. Then refine the purpose, name, reinforces my habit of staying in a relaxed, still state with no stimulation for at least 30 minutes after lying down to sleep. Confirm that the task is in your control, staying put, staying dark, staying off devices. If your current nervous system cannot handle 30 minutes, start with 15 and plan to increase manually over time. After that, choose a gentle, minimal symbol, a small dim blue or dark violet orb somewhere above your chest in your mind's eye, with no facial features or personality. Give it a neutral name and write the final purpose sentence and symbol description into the contract. Add strict prohibitions against affecting dreams, mood, or nighttime imagery, it only supports the no stimulation stillness behavior. Finally, tie it into your nightly routine. Activation context is only while I am lying in bed with lights off preparing to sleep. Activation phrase might be hold stillness, name, until my block ends. You do not time this with a visible timer but you keep a mental range. Deactivation phrase is stillness complete, name, stand down, used either when you notice drowsiness or when your block is over. This keeps the servitor bound to the pre-sleep bridge rather than all of sleep. Designing a simple emotional regulation servitor. Start by choosing one emotional pattern, not all of them. For example, when I feel criticized, I react instantly and say things I regret. That is a specific pattern. Do not try to fix my emotions in general. You want to intercept one repeatable cycle where behavior gets ahead of your better judgment. Next, define the behavior you want instead. For example, when I feel triggered, I will pause for 10 seconds and take one slow breath before responding. This is a concrete internal action, not a mood. You cannot command yourself to feel calm, but you can insert a pause and a breath before your mouth or fingers move. Then refine the purpose sentence to something like, name, supports my habit of pausing and taking one slow breath before I respond when I feel triggered. Confirm that this is physically and emotionally possible now. If 10 seconds feels unreachable in the heat of the moment, start with 3 seconds and one breath and extend later as you build capacity. After that, choose a very small, non-dramatic symbol, perhaps a tiny, cool click or a small dim light in the throat area that appears for a moment when you are about to react. Name it something neutral and record its purpose and symbol description. Add a prohibition that it will never suppress feelings, it only inserts a pause between feeling and action. Finally, bind activation to a clear inner sign, a spike of heat, tension in the chest, or the impulse to interrupt. You do not summon it with words during conflict, instead, you instruct in the contract, whenever this specific trigger pattern appears, name, briefly nudges me into one breath and a short pause, then stands down. Keep reviews honest, if it starts feeling like pressure or denial, you either soften its role or dissolve it. The point is to assist one tiny regulation step, not police your entire emotional life. Revising an existing servitor safely. Begin by printing or rewriting the servitor's current contract, purpose, boundaries, activation, and lifespan. Do not revise in your head. You are going to treat this like editing code, you need the current version in front of you. Reading it aloud once helps you see exactly what you originally asked for, not what you remember asking for. Next, list everything that is not working. Separate issues into 3 columns: purpose problems, boundary problems, and activation problems. Examples: purpose too broad, creeping into sleep, activating outside context, causing subtle pressure. Be specific. You are not judging the servitor, you are diagnosing the structure that produced its behavior. Then decide whether the issues are fixable by revision or indicate that the construct should be dissolved and rebuilt. If purpose is fundamentally wrong or attached to the wrong motives, dissolution is usually best. If the purpose is fine but boundaries or activation are loose, revision makes sense. Draw a line. Revise if the core is good and drift is local, dissolve if the core itself is flawed. If you choose revision, write a V2 contract page. Tighten purpose, sharpen boundaries, adjust activation and operational cycles using the step-by-step methods above. Once V2 is solid, perform a short ritual where you explicitly state, the original rules for name are now replaced entirely by this updated version. Visualize the old structure collapsing and the new one taking its place in a clean, simple form. Finally, treat the revised servitor as if it were new for the next 30 days. Shorten duration, keep logs, run drift monitoring weekly, and be stricter with context than you think you need to be. If problems vanish, the revision worked. If new problems appear or the old ones persist, you retire the construct and start from a fresh design rather than endlessly patching something that fundamentally does not want to hold shape. Building a servitor log and metrics system. Start by creating a single document or notebook dedicated solely to servitor work. Give each servitor its own section or page spread, with its name, purpose sentence, boundaries, and activation context written at the top. This becomes the reference snapshot for that construct. No servitor should exist without a written anchor in this log. Next, define 2 or 3 metrics per servitor that you can track. For a productivity servitor, metrics could be number of days I started within 5 minutes, number of sessions completed, or number of times I activated outside context, should be 0. Keep metrics simple and behavior-based. You are not trying to quantify your soul, just the behavior the construct is helping with. Then, after each activation, record a quick entry, date, time, context, whether you stayed inside rules, and 1 short sentence about how it felt and whether the target behavior occurred. Do not turn this into a diary, you are collecting data. Over weeks, you will see whether the servitor works, drifts, or does nothing. This removes guesswork from the process. Once a week, review the entries and metrics. Calculate simple counts or percentages, how often you met the behavior target, how often you activated correctly, how often something felt off. If numbers are improving and subjective entries feel better, the construct is likely helping. If numbers are flat or getting worse, you either have design issues or dependence creeping in. Finally, use this system to decide instead of feel. When it is time for review, revision, or dissolution, you do not rely on mood, you look at your log. Metrics and notes tell you whether the servitor is worth keeping, tightening, or retiring. This turns servitor work from vague intuition into something closer to experimental self-engineering, where decisions are grounded in observable patterns rather than stories. Handling discomfort or resistance from a servitor. First, notice and name the discomfort. Is it pressure, anxiety, guilt, intrusive presence, or a sense of being watched or pushed? Write 1 sentence, when, name, is active, I feel, description. Naming it clearly stops it from being a vague unease and turns it into something you can work on. Do not spiritualize it, treat it like a misconfigured program. Next, check the contract. Compare your discomfort directly to the written rules. Is the servitor trying to operate in forbidden domains? Is its purpose too demanding for your current state? Has activation context become too broad? If your feeling lines up with a boundary breach or an unrealistic demand, the issue is structural, not mystical. Mark the exact rule being violated. Then, immediately tighten usage. Temporarily stop all activation except in the narrowest possible context, or stop entirely for a week while you review. Do not continue using it while hoping it gets better. When a tool hurts, you stop pressing it into the same wound. Use this pause to revisit purpose, scope, boundaries, and operational cycles. After that, decide, correction or dissolution. If the discomfort is mild and clearly tied to fixable factors, too long sessions, too many activations, slightly overambitious purpose, you can rebuild the contract and restart as a V2. If the discomfort feels like pressure on your autonomy, identity, or emotional safety, you skip revision and move straight to dissolution using the steps above. Finally, after correction or dissolution, spend at least a week without any servitor touching that domain. Instead, use boring, mundane tools, timers, lists, basic CBT-style reframes. Notice that your baseline self is still there and capable. This resets your nervous system so you do not unconsciously attribute all progress or safety to constructs. Only then, if you want, you design a much gentler and narrower servitor for that space. Separating servitors from guides, spirits, and imaginary friends. Start by drawing a hard line in your notes, a column titled Servitors and a column titled Everything Else. Under Servitors, you list constructs that are explicitly internal, contractual, and behavior-focused. Under Everything Else, you park guides, deities, archetypes, ancestors, muses, and whatever metaphysical relationships you may have. This simple division keeps categories from blurring. Next, write a one-sentence definition for your servitor system. Servitors are symbolic behavior programs created by me, for me, bound to written rules, and fully under my authority. Then write a separate one-sentence definition for any spiritual or relational beings you work with. The point is not theology, it is preventing internal software from being treated as an external relationship and vice versa. Then, add a rule to every servitor contract: name is not a spirit, guide, companion, or external being. It will never speak to me, request things from me, or present itself as anything other than an internal tool. This prevents your own archetypal material from dressing the servitor up in a costume and tricking your emotional system into attaching to it as a friend or ally. After that, if you genuinely work with guides or deities, make a separate time and container for that work. You do not mix servitor construction sessions with devotional rituals, trance contact, or mediumship. Different tools, different rooms, different headspaces. Servitors stay in the realm of self-engineering, everything else belongs to whatever spiritual path you follow. Finally, whenever a servitor starts feeling like a presence, talking back in your imagination, or blurring into something relational, you treat that as a red flag for drift, not as a cool spiritual upgrade. You either radically simplify its identity and reinforce boundaries, or you dissolve it. Servitors can coexist with your spiritual life, but they are not part of the same category, and keeping that separation protects both your practice and your mental health. Building a multi-servitor system safely. First, cap the number. Decide a maximum active servitor count, such as 3 or 5, depending on your experience and mental bandwidth. Write this limit down: I will not run more than X servitors at once. This prevents you from turning your inner life into a cluttered software stack you cannot monitor. Each construct should justify its existence. Next, map domains for each. Draw a simple diagram or list where each servitor's purpose domain is written and non-overlapping, one for task start, one for focus blocks, one for pre-sleep stillness, for example. If two are trying to influence the same slice of behavior, merge them or drop one. Overlap is where drift, confusion, and pressure start compounding. Then, give each servitor its own activation context, phrase, and log section. Never share phrases between constructs, never activate two for the same situation simultaneously, and never let multiple servitors run in a single moment. If you feel tempted to stack them, that is a signal to refine one better, not pile more on. After that, schedule a monthly system review. In that session, You look at all servitors together, which are actually helping, which feel heavy, which are redundant. If a behavior is now internalized, you plan dissolution. If something is not pulling its weight, you either adjust or retire it. Your system should get simpler over time, not more complex. Finally, consider running your life with 0 servitors for 1 or 2 weeks every few months. This resets your baseline and proves to your nervous system that you are still the one doing the living. After that break, you only reintroduce the servitors that you can clearly justify, one at a time. Multi-servitor systems should feel like a small, sharp toolkit, not a hive in your head. Transition from servitor support to self-reliance. Start by picking one servitor-supported behavior that has become easier. For example, starting tasks on time or holding focus for short blocks. Set a date where, for that behavior only, you will stop using the servitor and rely on yourself for a trial period, say, 1 or 2 weeks. Write that date in your log. This frames the shift as a deliberate training phase, not a sudden abandonment. Next, during that trial, mimic the previous activation ritual without actually activating the servitor. Go to the same context, breathe, say a short personal cue like "I do this on my own now," and then behave as trained. You are keeping the structure but removing the construct, letting your nervous system realize the pattern can run from your own will and habit. Then, log your performance as you did before. Did you still start on time? Did you still hold focus? Did you still pause before reacting? Compare those numbers to your servitor-assisted phase. If performance remains similar or only slightly weaker, you keep training without the servitor until the behavior feels natural. If performance collapses, note it without shame. It just means the habit needs more mundane support before you pull the scaffolding away. After that, if the trial goes well, formally retire the servitor for that domain using the dissolution procedure. Frame it as graduation. The behavior is now part of your baseline. Do not immediately create a new servitor for the same purpose. Give your system time to prove the habit is genuinely encoded without symbolic reinforcement. Finally, repeat this process with other servitors over time, always in small, controlled transitions. The endgame of servitor work is not to live with a permanent farm of constructs but to use them like braces, temporary supports that shape behavior, then come off when the structure is strong. The more cycles you complete, from construct, to training, to self-reliance, the more you trust that these tools are just that, tools you use, not crutches you depend on.